because you're kind-hearted and you feel like everybody should have equal. No, that's just a manifestation. But the real truth behind it is that that's the only way that the human spirit flourishes. So it's
Sure, that's the only way that the human species
Well,
advances and survives as well.
yeah.
well, he won me over when they were introducing the cabinet during the Clinton administration, and he came to the microphone and said, "I always knew I'd make his short list."
He is very
Yeah,
short.
and then it turns out, when I first saw he does these cartoons, like he shows everything in a cartoon, and he's a cartoonist, and then he did it
I didn't know
himself.
that.
Yeah, he started out. He has a Substack thing every day. You should look at, and then these days on Sunday he has a caption contest. So he writes a cartoon and then asks people to write in the caption and sends it back the next week. But he started doing these inequality. I mean, he's been doing this for years, And then the other thing is when you read some of his stuff, and he was on Stephen Colbert or something, and he talks about when Reagan came in. No, Reagan was before. When Bush came in or whatever, when the start of what the Heritage Society has been trying to do for the last 30 years happened, he was the Cassandra that nobody was listening to, and then so they show clips of him literally saying that what's happening now is what's going to happen if we don't have if we don't maintain affirmative action, if we don't take care of the poor, if we don't do all this stuff, if we don't get money out of politics, blah, blah. That's why he makes me think of Ralph Nader as well.
Well, we should leave this for later,
Okay.
because we're here for Torah study, and we've got a good group. So since I have my fingers on the controls, I vote let's get started. So. So Vayeitzei, it opens with Jacob on the road. Picking a rock for his pillow, he stops to sleep for the night and dreams a dream that has fascinated artists over the centuries. This illumination is from the Golden Haggadah, a 101-page manuscript created in early 14th century Spain and now in the collection of the British Museum. It's known as golden because of the gold leaf that was used in its illuminations, and it shows the young patriarch-to-be dreaming of a ladder with angels moving up and down, God at the top watching through a heavenly window. Also from Spain, but about 3 centuries later, this Jacob's dream is by Bartolomé Esteban Murillo. The Torah text is variously translated as ladder or stairway, and the artist places us looking at it head on, so it really could be either. A leading painter in Spain's Baroque period, Murillo was known for realistic paintings of Bible scenes and his use of light, which may have come from the influence of Italian artists when he visited Italy in his 20s. While the angels are lit by a heavenly spotlight, Murillo's Jacob is asleep, deep asleep in the shadows. French neoclassical artist Jacques Stella lights the scene very differently in this piece from about 1650, using his technique of painting on natural surfaces, in this case onyx, with a vein in the stone, creating a glowing background for the stairway or ramp of Jacob's dream. Stella packs a lot of detail into this piece that only measures about 8 by 13 inches, about the size of a legal pad, and his sleeping Jacob is some well-muscled dude, a physique that he's going to need for the wrestling main event, but that's in next week's parasha. Let's stay with the dream, and also that Baroque era. This landscape with the dream of Jacob, is by Michael Lucas Leopold Wilman, a German-born artist who traveled to Holland, where he came under the influence of Dutch masters like Rembrandt, Rubens, and Van Dyck. And then he traveled and worked across Central and Eastern Europe, where he became known for his expressiveness, technical dexterity, and speed, producing more than 500 paintings and frescoes in his lifetime. Wilman gives us an appropriately dreamlike, ethereal, almost transparent group of travelers up and down the stairway to heaven, while at its foot he gives us the sleeping Jacob and gives him a splash of color with that dramatically red cloak. Moving over to England, we get this early 19th century version by British illustrator William Blake, who seems to be channeling what will become known as Art Deco about a century later. His angels have a lithe elegance to them, and he accentuates that by making a grand spiral staircase ascending or descending, the sunbeams streaming down from heaven. For a contemporary take on the dream, this is by Ukraine-born Svyatozar Nenyuk, who also uses color in an interesting way with a more realistic rather than abstract view. The stairway curves gracefully while Jacob, wearing a red cloak, a lot of the artists put him in a red cloak, he dreams his dream. Known for biblical paintings, Nenyuk emigrated to the U.S. in 1991, and he now lives and paints in the Virginia suburbs outside of Washington, D.C. And while it opens with the dream, at the heart of Vayeitzei is a love story, as Jacob journeys on to the home of his mother's family, where he falls hard for one of his cousins. Here's Jacob's Encounter with Rachel by Italian Renaissance painter and architect Raphael, who ranks with Da Vinci and Michelangelo as the great artists of that Renaissance era. In this fresco, Jacob, with that somewhat faded red cloak over his shoulder, carries a shepherd's crook. He clearly knows what he's doing around livestock. Raphael has him meeting both sisters, who will become his wives, the plainer Leah and the beauty Rachel, who instantly wins his heart. Raphael's sense of nature and realism would continue to influence artists for centuries. For instance, the meeting of Jacob and Rachel by Victorian-era Scottish artist William Dyce. With almost photorealistic detail, he depicts a love-struck, handsome young Jacob and a modest, blushing Rachel. Jacob is again wearing red, a sash this time, as he moves to embrace the barefoot Rachel, a simple but elegant shepherdess. William Dyce was a founding member of the pre-Raphaelite movement of artists and writers who pushed for a return to the realism of the Renaissance and away from the modern Impressionist styles that were sweeping across European art circles at that time. Jacob tenderly kisses Rachel's forehead in this view by Dutch-born Ari Scheffer. He was known for his literature-inspired art, based on, among others, the works of Dante, Goethe, Lord Byron, and Sir Walter Scott, and as a prolific painter of the rich and famous, which brought him into the spotlight in France, where he became a court favorite. However, shocked by the brutal suppression of laborers demanding fair treatment, the June uprising of 1848, Scheffer turned his back on politics, even refusing an offer to paint Napoleon III, who reigned at the time, and turning to biblical themes instead for the last years of his life. Again, Jacob has that shepherd's staff and that red cloak, but the simplicity of the dress and the uncluttered background make the kiss the center of attention. Like so much of the biblical art, the characters look very European. That's something that pioneer Israeli artist Abel Pan turned away from. After traveling across Europe as a youth, for a time he studied under the same painter who taught the young Marc Chagall. Abel Pan settled in Jerusalem in 1913, recalling later, "It seemed to me I had already seen that city. I felt as though I had returned to the city of my birth after deserting it for hundreds of years." An early relationship with the Bezalel Academy led him to a teaching position there, but it also became a turning point as he chose to concentrate his art more on biblical themes. He never completed a planned illustrated Bible begun in the 1940s, but Pan said his goal was to present biblical characters as possessing the passions of human beings, with their virtues and vices, loves and hatreds. He frequently depicted Rachel, Rebecca, and the other biblical women as child brides, much like the teenage Jewish girls from Yemen who served as his models, along with young Bedouin girls. In this pastel, the teenage Rachel appears unsure of what to make of this impetuous and I think somewhat passionate kiss from the dusty traveler. Finally, a contemporary piece by an artist who goes by the name Eoluwin 1010 and doesn't show her face, just an avatar. I couldn't find out much about her other than she's part of a computer and AI collective called Deviant Art, and she's currently studying architecture and archaeology in Berlin, but I was intrigued by what she wrote about this version of Leah and Rachel. Jacob definitely preferred Rachel for her attractive looks, she explains, but rather than make Leah ugly, the artist tried to make her look rather plain instead by dressing her in mute colors and Rachel in more shining shades and jewelry. Of course, she points out Rachel was not richer than Leah, though she might have been more vain. However, Leah gives birth to many sons while Rachel is barren for a long time. As the artist puts it, they did not have an easy relationship. That's from Eoloin 1010, and that's art for Vayeitzei this time around.
They look like Disney characters.
They do.
Very much so.
It's Frozen, but yeah. Whoever she is, she's probably not more than 30 years old. Does that mean anything? I was going to just go Google L-O-E.
I could not find a meaning. I looked for it. I thought it might be something in
reference to
folklore or literature. I could not find it, so
Yeah.
I'm not.
No. All right.
So
it's
I
a
need to
cycle.
search a little more for it. But I was intrigued by not only what she painted, but what she did with the computer, but what she wrote. I worried that she might actually be AI, and I was thinking of our late friend Phil, who I think would have very much appreciated an AI artist in the group.
And I'm reminded of this.
What?
What did he say?
Arnie,
Say
were you
again,
gonna share?
Arnie?
Can you hear that?
No. What'd you say?
I'm playing something. I thought you might be able to hear it. It's Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin.
Of course. Well, this is the original Stairway to Heaven that we have, right?
Right.
Or Stairway from Heaven.
That's right.
So
What direction are they going in?
We'll find out what people think about that. Let's
It's an
do,
escalator up and
so
down.
was it a stairway or a ladder?
Ladder.
Well,
That's what I thought. So it's interesting to me that the artist depicts so many stairways instead of ladders.
Well, I think when we get to the Hebrew, I want to ask Aviva about the word because I found
Yeah.
it variously translated. The translation that I used is from Alter, and he says ramp. So
Which further complicates the situation.
they had the ADA in mind all the way back then.
that's
let's
you
do
think
Misha
of-
Berach so we can get to the good stuff.
yes.
Okay.
What were you saying, Arnie?
I was just thinking, when you think of ascending to heaven, maybe it's my imagination, but I don't think you need any ramp, stairway, or ladder or anything. I just imagine it as floating up or something, So I don't know,
Good
maybe it's
discussion in a
just
very
me.
few minutes. Yeah,
Yeah,
looking forward to it.
okay.
I want to remember that Trina just had surgery. She's recovering from her back surgery.
So Misha Berach to Trina,
And I
Marilyn.
want to
Mike.
mention our friend Mike Bernstone, who is dealing with a fractured sacrum.
Oh,
And so he's kind of laid up and not able to do much for a while and in a lot of pain, but he said that he's getting treatment and working through it.
My brother, Shalom Ben Tzvi,
Still in the hospital, or is he?
he just got released from the hospital, but he's still, it's going to be a hard recovery. Yeah.
Okay, so on the screen, Sarah and Marilyn. And I don't know, who else needs a Misha Berach among us before we move on to, of course,
You.
me?
Yeah.
Okay. And Craig Silverman, yes.
I'll take one.
My sister, Dr. Nancy,
They're free.
Yeah.
she took a fall and she'll get better, hopefully.
Okay,
If they're free, I'll take two.
our nation and the nation of Israel.
I'll take one too
Yeah.
for my torn in my knee.
okay.
And
And
I
we
have
can-
to say, no, go ahead. I was going to say mine before I start singing it. So do you have some, Aviva?
No, go ahead. I think globally.
Universal. I know. When she said Israel and America, I was also thinking about what's going on in Ukraine right now. Not that's cool, but
Okay, my friend Chaya
Dan.
Baslea, my friend Lee Slater, And who else? And the other night, I don't know his last name or anything, but at Thanksgiving dinner, there was an incident. My new friend Stan had to go to the hospital, so I'd like to include him. I don't know Stan's last name, but
Hashem knows.
yeah.
By the way, Sarah, I just wanted to say your color looks very good.
Oh, well,
It does.
thank you.
You look perkier.
And of
I'm
course,
hang-
Sherry
hanging in
and
there. I'm hanging in there.
I want to add a Mishabel for Sherry and Alice.
Amen.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Right.
I want to add one for my sister,
Mhm.
friend Gina. I spent Thanksgiving with a friend and didn't know 3 weeks ago her husband had a brain bleed and didn't care. So David Adler. And then I just found another friend was in a car accident.
Oy vey.
I'd like to add one
Marshall
also
Zim.
for Michael. Michael,
I'd
he's
like
got
to add Roz.
And what about Jan?
Yes, absolutely, Jan, for sure. And
Okay, let's do it.
Let's do it. Makor habracha, source of strength, oh, bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, ah,
Amen.
Timotenu, Makor habracha. Bless those in healing with refuah shlema, the renewal body, the renewal spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu
Eloheinu melech
melech
haolam
haolam,
asher
asher kidshanu v'tzasav v'tzivanu
tzivanu
לעשות b'divrei Torah.
I am going to ask Heather to read this first section. Heather, we're going to read from 28:10 through 22, and then proceed from there to a special treat.
Okay. And Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran, and he came upon a certain place and stopped there for a night. And for the sun had set, and he took one of the stones of the place, and he put it at his head, and he lay down in that place. And he dreamed and looked, a ramp was set up against the ground with its top reaching the heavens. And look, messengers of God were going up and coming down it. And look, the Lord was poised over him, and he said, I, the Lord, am the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, to which I will give you, and to your seed. And your seed shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall burst forth to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and the south. And all the clans of the earth shall be blessed through you, and through your seed. And look, I am with you, and I will guard you wherever you go. And I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done that which I have spoken to you. And Jacob awoke from his sleep, and he said, Indeed, the Lord is in this place, and I did not know. And he was afraid, and he said, How fearsome is this place! This can be but the house of God, and this the gate of heavens. And Jacob rose early in the morning and took the stone he had put his head, and he set it as a pillar and poured oil over its top. And he called the name of that place Bethel, though the name of the town before had been Luz. And Jacob made a vow, saying, if the Lord God be with me and guard me on this way that I am going, and give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, and I return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone that says a pillar will be the house of God, and everything that you give me, I will surely tithe to it to you.
So Heather shared with me that she wrote a Dvar Torah about this subject. And I thought this would be a real treat for us to actually hear it, because that's what we do together. And so I would love to hear it, Heather, if you're okay with that.
Okie dokie.
Then we'll open it to more discussion.
There is a line in the Torah that stayed with me for years. Jacob's words when he wakes from his dream of the ladder. Surely God was in this place, and I did not know it. Jacob is alone when he says this. He is between one life and the next. He has left home, unsure of what awaits him, and lies down with only a stone for a pillow. And yet, in that ordinary place, a place that didn't look holy at all, he discovers that the divine had been with him the whole time. His awareness, not God's presence, was what had been missing. That moment has echoed in my life more times than I can count. In 2019, I took a solo trip to California and house sat for someone in Ventura County. It was the first time in a long while that I had real solitude. I had no schedule, no responsibilities, no one to answer to. And so I made a quiet decision for those 2 weeks. I would follow what I felt to be God's nudges. On my morning and evening walks through the countryside, I tried something I don't often allow myself to do. I slowed down enough to listen. I felt a tug in a direction and I followed it without questioning. That is not normally how I live. In my regular life, if I feel an inner pull, I'm quickly to label it as silly, irrational, or impractical. But on this trip, I resisted that eternal critic. I trusted the tug. And that experience became the most magical, soul-filling time I had ever had. Every turn brought a surprise. Every day felt spontaneous. Every moment felt intentional. One path led me to a secluded beach, a place I would never have discovered. In that quiet stretch of sand, I understood something simple and profound. The more I seek God, the more God reveals himself. And there was another insight, one that startled me with its softness. As I walk, I began to wonder if God created us to experience life in a body fully, as if God delights in our delight, experiences the world through our senses, and shares in our awe. One afternoon, I bit into a perfectly ripe peach, the kind that melts in your hands and runs down your wrists, and I found myself whispering, "This is for you, God." Each bite became an act of awareness, a way of saying, I am here, you are here. Let me not miss this moment. By the time I returned home, I thought the revelation would have changed me permanently. I even wrote a short book draft about the experience. But slowly, as life resumed its normal pace, I fell back into old patterns. The stillness faded, the awareness dimmed, and I slipped back into a kind of spiritual sleep. And yet, every so often, something wakes in me again. Walking along the coastline near my home, seeing the waves crash over the black sand, or hiking through Volcanoes National Park with the sky and the clouds so immense, I wonder if I could reach up and touch God. And in these moments, Jacob's line returns. Surely God was in this place and I did not know. Maybe the task of a spiritual life isn't to stay awake all the time. Maybe it's simply to remember again and again that the holy is already here. Already in the quiet places, already in the ordinary ones, already in us. My hope for myself and for all of us is that we notice, that we allow ourselves to be tugged toward wonder, that we slowly slow down enough to say, God is in this place. I just forgot to look.
Nice.
Wow.
Very
Beautiful.
nice.
That's beautiful.
Hey.
Very
Really.
nice.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
And yes, the answer to your question is yes. He did put us on earth to enjoy the senses and all, and have a vicarious experience with his creation.
That was really wonderful, Heather. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
It was.
So,
Nervous,
so we say
right up
Hanaho.
No,
What'd
we
you say?
say, we say Yishar Koach.
Yes.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, cool.
Did you
Okay.
write that just for yourself or did you present it somewhere?
Well, I wrote part of it when I wrote that book draft after 2019. And then when I came back from Shabbat services after listen to Barry speak, it just kept playing in my mind the whole drive home. And I got home and it just all came out really quick that way.
Wow.
Yes.
And I wrote Aviva to tell her I came up with this and I didn't know what to do with it. So here we are.
Thank you for
Ta-da, great.
it. It was
Yeah,
lovely.
thanks.
Thank you.
Yehuda, go ahead.
I want to pose that maybe the Hebrew, the English translation doesn't necessarily say what's being said in Hebrew. And that I want to pose that this is the first time that God has a conversation, or God even reveals himself in his own way to Jacob. And that when he says Lo Yadati, it's translated normally as I didn't know he was in this place, but why not just translate it? I didn't even know there was God.
What do you mean?
What do you
Say that again.
I said, well, it's traditionally translated. I didn't know that God was in this place, but the Hebrew is V'anochi lo yadati. It doesn't say place. It could actually be referencing, I didn't even know there was a God, because he never had experienced God before this in the writing. This is the first time ever there's an interaction between Jacob and God.
But he has to know about God. I mean, he comes from the forefathers.
He doesn't know about it personally, and this is a
Well,
personal
that's an
statement.
interesting thing. That's an interesting thing because I think that when you leave your home, often like Abraham did, that's when the real spiritual journey begins. And, as what Heather was alluding to, when you're somewhere on your journey away from the material things of the world or the home, stuff that sort of you get wrapped up in,
Mundane.
the mundane, that's when your real spiritual journey begins.
I like it, Yehuda, because, just personally, I could definitely reflect on my own experience having, this regiment of God, going to Cheder and Bar Mitzvah and all this. It's just like a regiment. You're told to believe it and you want to believe it and you're just doing it. But then you get to a point in your life where you get this spiritual awareness all of a sudden. It's like, a bolt of lightning opening your chakras or whatever you want to call it, And
It's when you go on your
different.
own personal search.
It's
Yeah.
your own, it is, it's different,
It's much different.
a
And
type
very
of
often,
enlightenment.
you leave home to do it.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm talking about is that the translation makes it, in effect, place-based, but place-based anywhere you are.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it, that I didn't know there was God, it sort of takes the place out of it because God is everywhere and he didn't realize that.
Yeah, I think that's very insightful.
I think you could also add to that because he had this in a dream. In this place was in his own essence, his own being. But then, we tend to have to make everything concrete and physical. And he was asleep. I was going to say, even though he was older, this was like the first bar mitzvah. Like to Sarah's point, the maturity, the entrance into adulthood, to have these realizations for oneself and not just to be following, even as Arnie said, what you've been taught. Even back then, Isaac, Rebecca presumably had this direct conversation with Hashem, right? And even though Jacob was more the shepherd than the huntsman, but wasn't also, and this is probably from the Midrash, that he was the more studious. He was the mama's boy and also the more contemplative, studious one. Am I wrong about that? So
if you interpret the Hebrew, the plain Hebrew from the last parasha, that is an assumption that can easily be
Mhm.
made. Alan,
This maybe tags onto Yehuda's premise and maybe lend some credence to it, because there's something in the last couple of lines that struck me as very transactional. It's he's saying to God, "Prove yourself to me. Prove that you're there by making these things happen, giving me the food that I need and the clothing to wear and get where I'm going. And then I will, what's the, I'm trying to remember what the exact translation was. I will, then the Lord will be my God."
yeah,
And it seems as though he's sort of putting a challenge out there, saying, I've had a moment here that certainly moved me, and now I need the proof that you're really there, God.
He's
in
doing
my
an
translation,
if-then.
it says, I'm just going to read my translation from the Plout. Jacob then made this vow: if God is with me and watches over me on this path that I'm taking and gives me bread to eat and clothes to wear, and if I return safely to my father's house, then will Adonai be my God.
Right. It's the if-then.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What do you think of using a stone pillow? I mean,
That's the
I
first
know,
thing I keyed in on. Ugh.
I know that, I was told that, Japanese often use these wooden blocks for pillows. And there might be some benefit, if the pillow is small and rectangular and you put it under your neck or something when you sleep on your back, that has some positive effect. But otherwise, if it's a big giant rock that it's uneven surface and you're trying to get some sleep, it's going to be very disturbed.
Well, in turn, also, where you add, we're further on, he decides he's taking this rock that he slept on and making a monument out of it.
Right.
How big was this rock?
Yeah.
So actually, in the Hebrew, it doesn't say one stone, it says of the stone. He took of the stones, plural.
I slept on a pile of stones.
Well, so medically and physiologically, you always want to keep your spine aligned. So if you're lying on the ground, your spine is not straight, and if you can do anything to straighten it up, you'll be better off. So that's just a simple, very plain explanation. I want to go back, Alan, you wanted to, well, the whole issue of the dream is something that every year it feels, even if we say the same darn thing, it feels important all over again. Because of the states when our forefathers and foremothers had conversations or interactions with God, this is the only one that's in a dream. So I think that's pretty significant. And it speaks to what Heather brought up, is that you going outside of your norm sometimes just disengages your brain from your always way of thinking. So you're much more open. And I remember the first year we studied this, we had a Joyce. Does everybody remember Joyce from Torah study?
Yeah.
She actually wrote a book about dreams, and I read it, and
Oh, Joyce with the red hair.
right. And it really, I never could understand, I never could think outside of the way that I've always thought about dreams, which is your brain is in a state of relaxation, so to speak, in that you're not involved in the waking everything that's going on, and that is an elevated state because you're open. It's just like listening to music. Your parts of your brain quiet down and are available for something else. So I always just looked at the simplicity of the idea of a dream, but significantly in the ways that we have lots of ways that our ancestors interacted with God. This is a different one. This is very unique. The dream.
I mean, again, to me, Jacob leaving his family home, that's a bold step.
Mhm.
And to me, it marks the beginning of his spiritual mission in life. This is his journey. And I think the lesson that it teaches is that you have to be bold in a certain way. You have to be willing to take some kind of a bold step before you really see that God is with you.
It's almost like a line, a demarcation. Like you can note what was before and what's after that point in time.
Exactly. And that clarity only comes if you're willing to make some kind of a bold move or take a bold step that puts you in faith, in the cloak of faith. And that I think that's what happened to Jacob.
But let's not lose sight of the fact of why he left home. It wasn't because, oh, I want to see the world and learn about things. He was worried for his life. He thought his brother was going to kill him.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we already have
very-
experience with a brother killing another brother.
It forced him into taking that bold step.
Yes. Mhm.
But he has to see later that his brother forcing him to leave home meant that he had nothing to give to Rachel as far as a gift. I mean, that's going to come up, right? He had nothing because I think Esau stole it or somebody stole it from him. So, or I don't know, maybe that's
It
in
may
the
be
oral-
midrash, yeah.
That may be it in the oral tradition. But
Didn't someone say that his dad Isaac might have been a little
Yeah,
mentally
yeah,
deficient and stuff like that?
I don't think
So
that's
just-
true.
Okay, well, I was just thinking, think of his upbringing and his crazy upbringing that it was. If he had a father like that, a brother like that, and he's leaving home, the guy has really nothing because, when I left home, at least I had a fallback or something, he doesn't really have a fallback. And his experience is really different and he's searching. And I think this gave him confirmation that maybe there's a God. So for the first time, it's a revelation.
This is interesting because, it seems like all of us have been on a spiritual journey that we can identify. I'm not saying that isn't true of most people, but the fact that here we are in our 60s, 70s, 80s discussing this with some perspective, which is not there yet when you're younger and in the throes of it. It's interesting that we're doing this. I like the fact that this parasha is bringing this out in all of us to relate with the character, the characters that are here as the protagonists, how that relates to our own journeys. It's interesting.
Nothing new under the sun, huh?
Well, yeah, right. And then everyone is unique in its own way too.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
I don't know who had their hand up first, you or Ruth Ellen.
Go
I
ahead,
had my
Ruth.
real hand.
Okay, go ahead.
I
Ruth
had my
Ellen, after
real
that, you,
hand, then
Hugo.
I put the other one up.
I
See-
want to note that his destination is Kedem. Kedem basically references his origins. Time at the beginning. And when you just said, Arnie, when you just said, well, he didn't know when he's leaving home, he didn't know where he was going. He actually was going back to the origins of the family. That's what Kedem references, because names mean something in the Torah.
But had he been there before or just the family?
Nobody knows of it. That's why he's
He
going
knows
there.
of it, but he
Mhm.
doesn't.
Yes.
He's
Because it's his mother's brother. Well, he
Right.
knew of it.
But it's the important word is the place he's going to is Kedem.
Mm.
Kedem. We have Kedem in our prayers too. We're referencing back to the origins.
And there's
I
Kedem
see.
wine.
yeah, ketamine, that's right.
I was trying to speak back to what Aviva was talking about, that it was in a dream, and it started making me think to take it more symbolically. Now, I've also just read one of Rabbi Sax's drashas, which points out what we always talk about, the three patriarchs kind of filled different roles. I mean, Abraham was, it was a physical thing and says, leave your home and go to this place that I will show you. There has to be it's like in the business development, you know, there's the nascence of a new enterprise, and then it matures, and he sort of said Isaac was kind of like the bridge of continuity, because we often say that he's kind of like the Nebush of the three, but no, he just had a different role. Jacob, he surely must have heard from his mother. I mean, the whole idea that they tricked his father and all that, he sort of knew he was supposedly destined for something.
Oh, sure
but
he knew.
but he wasn't ready for it. The fact that it came in a dream, I think, gives us the notion that this is something beyond the physical world. We're starting to get into the spiritual connection that's going to make the covenants. And the third thing is he talked about is in this way, because through the dream, Hashem came to Jacob more than Jacob turning around and saying, what is this? Why am I here? You know, that kind of thing. So this is kind of like the natural progression of the maturation of the whole tribe. Go ahead, Yehuda.
Yehuda?
I want to just throw this thing, you know, we tend to think of this story from former parashot about the deception of Isaac, but what if we just think of it in terms of, well, Isaac instead was complicit, and that he actually did know what this is about, and he knew that he had to actually address the fact that the promise needed to go a different place, because there's so many things within the Torah which throw on end and throw out the traditional way of handling these things in their societies of that time, where it always went to the firstborn. And here we can think maybe he was complicit and that he did know, because how could he not know? Even blind, how could he not know? I mean, we recognize people around us in so many different ways. And even if our sight was taken from us, we would recognize people. So I can't help but think he was actually complicit in this whole thing to move the story and the promise forward, and to eliminate the former thoughts about the natural progression, which always dictated that the oldest got his first, and that this is more of the Jews throwing out primogeniture.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have been as good a story, and people wouldn't have told it. I mean,
It's not even
if
as
the
good a
goal
story.
is the goal is to tell the
One at a
story.
time, guys, one at a time.
Yeah, you're right, but then, you're right, because we are, so much of the Torah is code matching, where we have repetitive things, where we got the deception then we have the deception with Leah and Rachel, I mean, it's, it comes back to him exactly the same way that he did something. Anyway, right. I agree with you.
I'm looking at Craig's, because Jacob slept on stone pillows, perhaps Jews are stubborn, hard-headed, and why Jacob soon went looking for a hard-headed woman or two, with apologies to Cat Stevens.
I wanted to put a ha-ha emoji for Craig, but I couldn't find it.
I'm looking for
Another interpretation of that is that that he chose 12 stones to sleep on, which were and made them into one pillow, which was, a foreseeing of the 12 tribes, that he would father the 12 tribes into one nation. That's another midrash. I'm just throwing things
When
into.
Yehuda threw out his notion, it made me think, I kept thinking of Shakespeare. All the world's a stage and we're all merely players and we have our parts to play. And Isaac has his part to play, and this is to the degree that how literally do we take this? And we talk about if it was all predestined. I mean, I still get blown away, because I never realized when I was young until the first year we read it, it stuck with me, that Hashem told Abraham, this is going to happen and they're not going to listen to me and there's going to be problems and they're going to be enslaved all these years, So speaking to, again, the players involved, like the fact that Hashem made hardened the heart of Pharaoh and all this constantly brings up in this mythological storytelling how much has to do with fate and the divine intervention, and how much has to do with what originates from the will of the player involved,
I mean, but you could see it, because he goes on to have 12 sons who become the 12 tribes of Israel. So to me, it's not mystical. It's like, it's right there happening, coming into fruition.
But that's pretty, I mean, I don't know what you mean by it's not mystical. All of it is. I mean, it's all
I mean,
on there.
it's only mystical until it becomes
I mean,
true.
you're saying, how did he know he was going to have 12 sons? Did he know that? He didn't even know who he was going to marry, presumably, or unless we say, well, he's our father. He was having these communion with Hashem all along. This is just the first introduction to the
I
rest of
think that
us.
I think that it's being manifested to him as he goes along and as he gets more faith. He climbs that ladder, and there's angels, and this is, go ahead.
I think maybe it's that he becomes more comfortable in recognizing Hashem's hand in things, like
Yeah,
it was
that's what
happening
right.
yeah.
Remembering that all the stories are cumulative. In other words, no story really sits apart from the other. We have in the Hebrew reminders because we have an exact wording here that says, through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. That was first said to Abraham in that first sentence of Lech Lecha. Get up, leave your father's home, blah, 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 go to a place that I will tell you on faith. And through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. So
why
here we
would
go.
you, so why would Jacob be surprised? Maybe he needed a realization of this, but
I think this goes back to, and I love that Heather actually is the one who started the book club, and the first book we read was called Here All Along, tying into what Marilyn is saying about us being in our 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever age range we span here. I don't know, Joel might be younger. I have no idea. But whatever age range we are at our starting point, that's just because of culture. Because if we lived in a different time, we would be doing this over a lifetime. So the concept of over a lifetime, here all along, all these things are very instructive to us in saying you don't have to be already at a certain place to start your journey. From wherever you are, that's
Right.
where your journey is. It just so happens that we are an older group. Maybe at our age, we're willing to give up a Saturday morning to sit in front of a computer. Maybe younger people are doing it differently, but maybe that's not a commitment for us. It's very comfortable to make this commitment. But the idea of the seeking versus just being open to, right? Because that's kind of what we're talking about. You're seeking God versus being open to the experience. And that happens all the time. We may not notice it. Sometimes it takes a state of sleep to quiet everything else down to notice it. Okay, Arnie, and whenever we want to, we'll move along after Arnie.
Yeah, I just was wondering if this is the beginning of the Jewish cultural phenomena known as Bubamaises. That here again, I'm just saying that if you want a story to last generations, you got to make it interesting, and I don't take these things, so literally as see the beauty in the storytelling. And I'm amazed that this has lasted so long, this story, when you think about it. And if it was just, oh yeah, he took a trip, he met a couple chicks, had a good time, it wouldn't have been as interesting, right?
I think this is such a deep conversation that's probably going to end up being one of our next Judaism 101 conversations. But what you're bringing up is very tricky to me. The idea that it lasts so long, or that, we have to tell it in an engaging way, otherwise the stories might disappear. I've learned to understand it differently. And the here all along aspect, when he wakes up and says, oh, God was here, but I just didn't know. God is in this place, but I just didn't know it. It was me who didn't know it, right? So that is a very important concept. And in a way, the fact that as Jews, we have even survived to have this lovely session on a Saturday morning is very tied into that. It's not coincidence, and it's not about stories are. The stories are not good, in fact. They're mostly
We
kind
can
of ugly.
agree to disagree.
Yeah, no, but seeing how this evolves over time, to me, this is something that I've learned to understand, because for me, there was a second nature to it. I didn't have to struggle. It's my stories that it is my stories. But I see how in a different place, when you leave your birthplace, and yet you have this thing that feels like a burden you carry with you. Is it a burden, or is it just something that always is? And it's up to you. You got your lifetime to figure it out. You're not required to figure it out at some point.
It was his responsibility to take care of his parents when they aged, right? When he left. So that was a burden he left behind in a way.
We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
Remember, he was sojourning right in there. He says, if Hashem gives me back to he doesn't know yet that we know that he's not going to get the girl he wants right away. And it's going to be 14 years? But he was not leaving for good. He was not leaving permanently. So let's put it that way.
I lost my note to tell us how much we're reading. Okay, well,
I'll
somebody
read
start
if you
reading.
want.
Yeah, go ahead.
And Jacob lifted his feet and went on to the land of the Easterners. And he saw, and look, there was a well in the field. And look, like this one, there's a lot of looking. It's 3 flocks of sheep were lying beside it. For from that well they would water the flocks, and the stone was big on the mouth of the well. And when all the flocks were gathered there, they would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and would water the sheep and put back the stone in its place on the mouth of the well. And Jacob said to them, my brothers, where are you from? And they said, we are from Haran. And he said to them, do you know Laban, son of Nahor? And they said, we know him. And he said to them, is he well? And they said, he is well. And look, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep. And look, and he said, look, the day is still long. It is not time to gather in the herd, ater the sheep and take them to graze. And they said, we cannot until all the flocks have gathered, and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well, and we water the sheep. He was still speaking with them when Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it happened when Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that he stepped forward and rolled the stone from the mouth of the well and watered the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kin and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. And it happened when Laban heard the report of Jacob, his sister's son, he ran toward him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. And he recounted to Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, indeed, you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him a month's time, and Laban said to Jacob, oh, I'm so sorry. David popped in front of me. Sorry. Get out of there. And Laban said to him, indeed, you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him a month's time. And Laban said to Jacob, because you are my kin, should you serve me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be. And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, the name of the younger Rachel. And Leah's eyes were tender, but Rachel was as comely in features and comely to look at. And Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, better I should give her to you than give her to another man. Stay with me. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed in his eyes but a few days in his love for her. And Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my time is done, and let me come to bed with her. And Laban gathered all the men in the place and made a feast. And when evening came, he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to Jacob, and he came to bed with her. And Laban gave Zilpah, his slave girl, to Leah, his daughter, as her slave girl. And when morning came, look, she was Leah. And he said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? And why have you deceived me? And Laban said, it is not done thus in our place to give the younger girl before the firstborn. Finish out the bridal week of this one, and we shall give you the other as well for the service you render me for still another 7 years. And so Jacob did. And when he finished out the bridal week of the one, he gave him Rachel, his daughter, as wife. You said 30, but that's where you want to stop.
It's okay, either place. When I read through it this morning, I thought through line 30. No, it's fine. Yeah. The next one starts at 30. Okay, thank you. So there's one line in there that I thought was really funny. And that's, there's the herders have to come together to remove the heavy stone off the well so that all the herds could drink. But when he sees the beauty of Rachel, he is able to single-handedly just roll the stone off. So I thought that was kind of funny. Didn't
Yeah,
want to gloss over it. The power of love.
yeah. And that
It struck
begs
me-
that also begs the question, why did he cry when he kissed her?
Because he knew she was
He-
the one.
He was moved.
He knew she would. I believe that. I think you're
Yeah.
absolutely right on spot.
Mhm.
I think he knew that not only did he know she was the one, but he knew that she was the beginning of the nation.
He was moved. I don't know that he knew that she was the beginning.
I think he did, but he looked into her eyes. I think he could see that. I totally believe that.
Maybe
I
he
think
got
that-
a, maybe
go
he
ahead.
got a killer for moving the stone.
Oh my God.
Arnie.
One of the things that's hit me for the first time in all these years is we're talking about the notion that Yehuda brought up earlier about progenitor. I never say that right. Progenitor, the birthright of the first. And here it is the first time we have it reversed where it's the eldest daughter has to be taken care of before the second one,
Yeah,
so
yeah, those are the
there again,
rules.
and it's still that same recurring theme of flipping it on its head because he didn't happen to love the older one. I
All
mean, he
right,
probably
so,
cared,
but that was the cultural part of it. But when he
but
looked
like
into
Arnie said, that also makes the story more interesting, right?
when he looked into, the eyes are the window to the soul. And so when he looked into Leah's eyes, it wasn't the same as when he looked into Rachel's eyes. It was like their souls met. So he knew something I know it sounds la la, but it's really true. I mean, I have,
No, I'm thinking of that song, that standard song like Splendor of the Grass when it goes da 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 da. I don't
Right.
know that's like
There's a
oh,
theme
that's why I
song
love
to it. Exactly.
Well, let's tie this back to the concept that forget who just brought this up. We don't know anything. The term for Leah not being beautiful or pretty, it's not really. All it says is that her something about her eyes being weak, and there that ties into what Sarah is saying. It is possible that after the revelation of understanding that God is everywhere, that though it is considered the first time that love is spoken of, actually the second time that love is spoken of as a person-to-person thing, like he fell in love with her, which we already know about Isaac, that happened to him, that what he's really seeing is that whole entire future. That
yeah,
look at the parallels between the story of Jacob cheating Esau out of the birthright and the blessing,
oh,
and because of the because of what was said when they were still in the womb, that the older will serve the younger. And here we have a mirroring, a really interesting mirroring of the place in the family where progenitor and the customs of the place, because Lavan doesn't say our heritage, he says our place. This is the custom of the place. So what Jacob is seeing is beyond that. He's seeing through the eyes into a future, because that's the story of to me, the story of the angels ascending and then descending in that order is is also the same vision that he has. He's not seeing the angels coming down to him with some messages. The angels first go up and then they come down. His
Right.
revelation is not coming down to him. His revelation is that he's open. And that is, I love what you said, Sarah, that seeing the whole future of the entirety of the Israelite nation.
And he may have also seen there may have been some sadness in that too, and that they weren't buried together in the end. So it ties up to the whole future, but then in the end, when her mission is done, so to speak, she passes away and is buried there where she's buried, not with him.
You're muted.
So it's just a beautiful thing. Like if you look deeply into somebody's eyes, like I have met people, not people that fell in love with, like, Jacob and Rachel, but like I have met people where I've looked into their eyes from a distance and sparks went off. There's so much energy in that meeting of the eyes, in the light of the eyes. It's a really amazing thing where I've ended up being very close to that person in some way or another. Not necessarily physically, but just there's a real
A bonding.
Yeah.
Isn't there a little, once again, there's the issues of translation from Hebrew to English that, right, that this word that's translated as weakness of eyes can also be gentleness or tenderness. And, and the contrast almost is saying that Rachel is a precocious kind of kid. And she's got, it's interesting that one painting that we had where she's so demure when Jacob's leaning forward to kiss her. My image of her is not that at all. My image of her is she's sort of an upfront kind of person. She's the one who steals the idols. It's her idea to do this. This is not in Leah's personality at all. Rachel's in, she's going to go out and get her stuff. And she's got all this extra energy and her eyes do sparkle versus her sister who has tender eyes.
More demure.
Demure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm with you there. And if I was translating from my own, 12-year-old Hebrew standpoint, I would say tender eyes.
Mhm.
That's how I would translate it in a simple reading. So, meaning to me that Leah was less cunning. She was more attuned to people, whereas Rachel had a longer view, the bigger picture, the things
Maybe
that
also-
can happen.
Maybe also a bigger ego. She was inserted in there.
That too. Alan, go ahead.
I have a problem with the idea of seeing the future, a future that Jacob has. I don't know how he knows about that at this point. I can't imagine them sitting around the tent having their goat and lentil dinner, and Isaac saying, "Well, you know what happened when I was told this by my father." I just don't think that they really passed. I don't get a sense, or at least it's certainly not in the Torah, that they passed that along. They each had to experience it in their own way, and that promise had to be made again to the next generation. So at this point, my feeling is that what we were talking about before, that Jacob is out on this adventure, this journey to find himself and find his place and find what he believes in and what he can move forward to. But I don't think he sees farther than that at this point, because he hasn't been given this. The dream only showed him a godlike presence and moved him to say, "I will accept God," but it doesn't say that God has told him that your people are good. You will be the father of a great nation, and the sands and the stars and all of that is going to be in the future. So I feel like he's not acting out of that being his motivation.
I completely agree. I think the stories as written are for us to make the connections. The individual people are just people, selfish, greedy, flawed, short-sighted. So when we read them cumulatively and we see the continuity of the thread of thought between Abraham and now Jacob, using the very same words, through you, all the people of the earth will be blessed. That's why I chose that particular thing. It is us who are making these connections.
Yeah,
Not
but
the
if,
people, they're not, I don't think Jacob went out on a journey of self-discovery. I think the whole point of how that part of the story is told is that he didn't. It happened. He had a revelation. He wasn't going out looking for it.
Mhm.
That's why it happened in a dream state. I completely agree with that complete approach. Reading it in a literal way gives me nothing. Reading it as these stories were put down on paper for us to not read once and believe, but to study and struggle with, to study and struggle with. We got a
right,
life
but
now.
the more you study and the more you struggle, the more growth the individual has, the more they can see in the reading. That's
Yep.
why people study it their whole entire life.
Yep.
Is because, and we do, because one year to the next, we can see more possibilities.
Let's hope.
Yeah. So I think I have Arnie, Yehuda, and Ruth Ellen with hands up. So Arnie first, and then I think it was Yehuda after that, and then Ruth Ellen.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on the whole cultural phenomena, you know, of dowry. You know, in this case, you know, the man has to give the dowry to the woman, but, you know, further down the line in history, the woman comes with the dowry, you know, and how you can interpret that as the value of women in a way, you know. But as I looked at it, I said, you could look at it both ways from either direction, really, culturally. And, you know, so I'm puzzled because, you know, it's just not black and white. And you know, and since I don't really know their culture and history back then, you know, it's just kind of a mystery to me. If anyone has any insights, I'd appreciate it.
I'm going to still call on you, even though that you probably weren't going to speak to that, but we're going to circle around back to that because I think people will have something to say about that. So go ahead, Yehuda, and keep
No,
in
I
mind
was going
what
to talk
Arnie just
about
brought up.
line, what is it, 29:13, the second part of it, where basically he says, well, Yisaper leLavan et kol hadvarim ha'eleh. And that is such a fraught sentence. What does it actually mean? He recounts to him all the word, you know, hadvarim ha'eleh could be words or the things that happened. What did he actually tell him? Was he so innocent to have told him the whole former story of how he got there, exposing himself and his own deceptions, setting up Lavan doing the same to him? Because Lavan knew this guy was a gullible guy. Oh my gosh. You know, and I actually can think that Jacob could be like this because look, it was his mother that put him up to it. It wasn't his own thoughts. He went along with it, but you understand my trepidation moving forward. Just reading those lines, I said, "What did he actually tell him?"
When I read that, he said, "You are indeed my bone and flesh," and it's like you're saying, Yehuda. It's ambiguous, which everything in the Torah is, right? I thought that meant that he was trying to prove to Laban that he was who he said he was, that he did come from his sister's home, you know. So he had to say enough about the family backgrounds that Laban would have had word of already, you know, so that he could verify that this guy wasn't a grifter, you know. That's how I interpret that. So I'm not sure necessarily that it necessarily meant that he told them every single part of the story. Although if he had a fight with his brother, it'd be hard to leave that out, to say that he had to leave in a hurry because he was fearing for his life. But
Before I call on Marilyn, I just want to clarify that it's possible that when in line 13 that you had pointed to, it refers just to the line before.
Yes.
That Jacob tells Rachel that he is her father's brother, but it doesn't mean that, mean kinsman. He's just basically telling her who he is. And then she goes and tells it to her father. And then when Lavan heard who he is, not the whole thing, just
Right.
the family connection. So I just wanted to add that.
No, I
Mary,
wasn't
other
done.
hand up,
I just answered Yehuda because that came up, but that's not what
Yeah.
I wanted to say. Can I say?
Okay, go
Although
ahead,
that
and then
also,
we'll call on
that
Marilyn.
also, what that just happened, that in some way in the condensed version mirrored what Eleazar or whoever, did when he told all this to Rebecca, and then he went and when she went home with him, he said that repeated the whole story again, so. But I was gonna say, and to Arnie's point too, let me see, what was I gonna say, because oh yeah, it was to Sarah's point about that he saw everything. I don't even know, forgive me if I'm wrong, misquoting, but I don't think Sarah necessarily meant that he was visually seeing it all.
No, I didn't.
No, I
Right.
didn't think you did.
No, right.
This is about intuition.
He saw
This is about
something,
something
right.
internal, not that cannot be seen. And we're talking, this is all brand new. And like Arnie said, what
It's
did they do back then?
Bashert. It's
Yeah,
Bashert.
but the story of our tribe, Bereshit, of this genealogy, they're starting something totally brand new, but it had to come from somewhere, right? And then I also think about the usual, well, the generation gap. Kids aren't going to believe Jacob could well have been told all these stories and knows where he's going. And I also think at some level, because Hashem chose Abraham and therefore all his seed, the original four parents, had a relationship with Hashem. That's something that we can't, that they were, to a certain degree, it's kind of like a psychic kind of thing, because they're having an actual communication that we've lost track of. And and then it totally really went off the cliff after the golden calf, So even they don't know what's going on because it's new to him. Maybe that's why Jacob had to be asleep. They say your brain clears out and then the dreams help you make sense of what's been happening to you. So you can even connect that to how we think about neuroscience and all that.
Your
And
subconscious comes
even
out.
if Jacob was told that this is where he experiences it for himself, that's the whole thing, is having the experience. And that goes back to what Aviva said and what Heather said about it was there all along. Our job is to open up to the awareness of what's been there all along.
Yeah.
And
Well
and
spoken,
each
well
forefather
spoken.
kind of does it in his own way, based on their part in the story too. So
Yeah.
okay, now I'm done.
Very good, Ruth Ellen. I like that.
I can barely remember what when it goes back and forth so much and there's conversation from one person to the next. Sometimes what you raised your hand for is no longer relevant, or you can't remember.
That's right.
But Marilyn, that's the nature of having an open conversation. So
Yeah.
that's why I keep a pen, because this happens to me very often too.
Okay, well, what I was going to say that I do remember is that Laban is not a savory character, and he never has been. And it is important to keep that in mind through all his transactions, because he is an opportunist. And I mean, I'd go as far as to say a cheater. He's not honest and, upright. And so that's where his dealings come from. And, that's important to keep that in mind, where it's easy to not keep it in mind because we're reading Torah, but this guy is a character, and the things that he goes about to set up are for sure not necessarily have the highest intent. Hashem's intent in a situation, and he can see the big picture and things for good. It is not necessarily the end goal of Laban, who is very self-driven and cares about, the outcome for him and his, and mostly him. So I just wanted to interject that, because I think it's important, especially when you're talking about, the possibility of a lineage that's going to go forward, for the rest of known time, and beyond. This guy he's a character. He's he's like a magician. He pulls things out of thin air. He makes up stories. Yeah, and I don't trust him, and I don't think anybody should trust him. He's clearly not portrayed as someone who's trustworthy. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Matan?
Well, that's kind of true of both of them. Laban and Jacob are both hustlers. So they both have to watch out for one another.
We talked about in earlier years that this deception of Jacob, it was like a karmic, quote unquote, karmic response to the fact that he was in on the deception of Esau, so it's kind of like a payback kind of thing, which I can see a level to that. It's all about, learning lessons and hopefully moving forward and improving how one lives based on pain from former lessons.
Well, and following up on that, I think that not to come to Laban's defense, but what's the last dealing he had with this branch of the family? Eliezer shows up with a bag full of jewelry, and he's hanging bracelets and earrings on Rebecca, and handing out goodies. So where's Jacob's? What's he got? He moves a rock. That's
That's because it was stolen from him by
where? That's somebody put that in there to maybe fill the gap, but it's not here in our text.
Well,
But
it's
there's
a
more-
midrash that when the brother and he had the fight, the dowry was stolen from him, was taken from him. That was part of what happened in the fight. Okay, so it's not written in there, but that's the oral midrash.
And also, Rachel loaded up the saddlebags with stolen idols. I mean, not necessarily I'm not putting
Loaded up, or was it just one? It was just
I never
one.
got the idea that it was just one.
I thought it was just
I think
one.
it was plural.
We'll have to wait and see. We
I
haven't read
don't
it
think
yet.
Leah would have done it with her
Oh.
tender eyes.
I want to also mention that we are seeing a transformation in Jacob, because at first he's described sort of a tent dweller, staying close to home. And here this parasha starts with him being out using a stone for a headrest. He could have folded up his red cloak, for crying out loud.
But that's because he
Stone.
had to run away from his brother again.
Right, but he's becoming quite the outdoors person. Then he's got the strength to lift a rock off a well. So there's a transformation that's happening. I think that's important to the
I
the
think
story.
I think we can't forget that there was a big to-do that happened between him and the brother, and that's when he left. So he was thought he was going to be killed by him. They probably took whatever, maybe he had to run fast and couldn't bring the dowry with him. I don't know those details, but I think the idea that there was a big family something or other that happened, he was afraid for his life and ran off. That,
Sarah, you've given me the idea that he's run off, and you know how people who are afraid nowadays put a gun under their pillow. They didn't have guns, so all he had was the rock.
the rocks, the rocks,
That's what he had under his head, just in case.
the 12 rocks for the 12 tribes.
I was just going to say quickly for Arnie's benefit, for Laban, every good story needs a good villain, right? That's back to the whole point of how literally.
But you're right, Arnie. He might have had those rocks there, and he might have thought, at least I have some rocks in case I'm attacked. I mean, you could be absolutely right. That we don't know. But it is interesting that he would put rocks under his head for a pillow.
And this villain, I don't know about that villain label. I mean, granted, he's not the greatest guy to deal with, but he's looking out for his daughters. He doesn't want Leah to be left home alone. What's she going to do? Cook for him for the rest of her life? She needs a family.
Another good point that goes with what you're saying, Alan, is that it shows that the obligation comes before some other things because he was actually obligated to marry the older daughter. That was a thing. That's how you married people in order. You didn't marry the younger one or the middle one before the older one was married. That's kind of,
But
I
if he
guess.
knew that he was in love with his younger daughter, he could have put more effort to find someone to marry the older daughter
Well,
too. Yeah.
that goes back to what Marilyn was saying about the way he dealt, with things. Wasn't always on the up and up.
Mhm.
And
Maybe I'll lower the dowry a little bit,
7 years of labor or 14 years of labor, that's pretty good gain.
Yeah, and there was no dowry, so maybe he thought, hey, I'm not giving up my cute little younger one before to no dowry. And also not
oh.
even getting the older one married.
I just looked
Marilyn,
up
please
about
speak.
the number. I just looked up about the number of idols, and the Hebrew word that is in the scripture is teraphim, and that's plural. So that's what it says here, is that Laban's household idols with an S, and then in parentheses teraphim in a camel saddlebag. So the
Interesting.
reference is more than one.
Sure, but they have to be small enough for her to sit on them.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
said that there was these were likely a set of small, potentially valuable figures associated with family inheritance or
Yeah.
divination, which were considered multiple items, not a single idol.
Interesting.
Toy soldiers.
All this conversation, I was
Goddess.
just thinking more subtly in terms of Laban's motives. Could he find another woman? Again, we're at this turning point because we're at the beginning of the evolution of a whole line of people. But remember, every time, do not marry among the Canaanites. Do not. Abraham sends his family, next generations, back to his homeland. Now, those people were still idol worshipers, but they still were sort of like a bridge because their genetic makeup, they were giving their children that to become part of the children of Abraham. So Laban may even have had some understanding, even though it wasn't him, that he could take advantage and get Rachel and Leah both situated in the family of the new line off of his line through his uncle Abraham. Right? Does that make sense? When I hadn't thought about it that way before. And then we get to the future, whether they could see it or not, that Leah was the one who was fruitful. How come we're not called Benjaminites? We're called Judah. Judah was the son of Laban. That's who ended up the tribe of Judah, quote unquote, is what we affiliate today. That's Leah, not Rachel, even though she was the favorite. And even though Joseph was a big mover and shaker in terms of our survival, you need both, you need the physical survival, you need the procreation, and you need the leadership, whatever.
Judah was more a geographic definition that became, why we were called Jews or from Judah.
Like Judea.
But it came from the fact that the tribes, Israel, see, that's the part of history there I have to go back and the biblical history that I'm not as familiar with, but, and the idea of the lost tribes and everything, the ones that presumably remained were the descendants of Judah for the most part, right?
I'm just talking about
anyway.
Judah and Samaria, the two locations.
Yeah. But just like we have, I live in Jacksonville, Florida, named after Andrew. I mean, the name of the place came from the person who settled there. So anyway,
but there was prominence and the whole area being called Judea. That's significant in terms of what Arnie's saying.
But it's both. My point just is looking ahead that
you think they were
Leah and Rachel were both destined to be part of the legacy
lineage
followed.
You're muted.
Let's go forward and look ahead.
Yeah. So Alan, we're going to go all the way through 30, 24. So chapter 30, line 24. It's a big one. Someone read.
And he came to bed with Rachel too, and indeed loved Rachel more than Leah. And he served him in still another 7 years. And the Lord saw Leah was despised, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bore a son, and called him Reuben, for she said, yes, the Lord has seen my suffering, and now my husband will love me. And she conceived again and bore a son, and she said, yes, the Lord has heard I was despised. Has given me this one too. And she called his name Simeon. And she conceived again and bore a son. And she said, this time at last my husband will join me, for I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore is his name called Levi. And she conceived again and bore a son, and she said, this time I sing praise to the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah, and she ceased bearing children. And Rachel saw that she had borne no children to Jacob, and Rachel was jealous of her sister, and she said to Jacob, give me sons, for if you don't, I'm a dead woman. And Jacob was incensed with Rachel, and he said, am I instead of God who has denied you fruit of the womb? I guess they didn't study genetics back then. And she said, here is my slave girl, Bilhah. Come to bed with her, and then she may give birth on my knees, and so that I too shall be built up through her. And she gave him Bilhah, her slave girl, as a wife, and Jacob came to bed with her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. And Rachel said, God granted me cause. Yes, he heard my voice and he gave me a son. Therefore she called him Don. And Bilhah, Rachel's slave girl, conceived again and bore a second son to Jacob. And Rachel said, in awesome grapplings I have grappled with my sister, and yes, I won out. And she called his name Naphtali. And Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children, and she took Zilpah, her slave girl, and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And Zilpah, Leah's slave girl, bore Jacob a son. And Leah said, good luck has come. And she called his name Gad. And Zilpah, Leah's slave girl, bore a second son to Jacob. And Leah said, what good fortune, for the girls have acclaimed me fortunate. And she called his name Asher. And Reuben went out during the wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to Leah, his mother. And Rachel said to Leah, give me, pray, some mandrakes of your son. And she said, is it not enough that you have taken my husband, and now you would take the mandrakes of my son? And Rachel said, then let him lie with you tonight in return for the mandrakes of your son. And Jacob came from the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, will you come with me to bed? For I have clearly hired you with the mandrakes of my son. And he lay with her that night. And God heard Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a 5th son. And Leah said, God has given my wages because I have my slave girl to my husband. And she called his name Issachar. And Leah conceived again and bore a 6th son to Jacob. And Leah said, God has granted me a godly gift. This time my husband will exalt me, for I have borne him 6 sons. And she called his name Zebulun. And afterward she bore a daughter, and she called her name Dinah. And God remembered Rachel, and God heard her, and he opened her womb. And she conceived and bore a son. She said, God has taken away my shame. And she called his name Joseph, which is to say, may the Lord add me another son. And it happened when Rachel bore Joseph that Jacob said to Laban, send me off, that I may go to a place into my land. Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, that I may go, for you know the service that I have done you. And Laban said to him, if pray I have found favor in your eyes, I have prospered, and the Lord has blessed me because of you. And he said, Name your wages that I may give them. And he said to him, you know how I have served you and how your livestock have fared with me. For the little you have before me, time has swollen to a multitude, and the Lord has blessed you on my account. And now, when I too provide for my household? And he said, what shall I give you? And Jacob said, you need give me nothing. If you will do this thing for me, let me go back and herd your flocks and watch them.
Okay, I wanna stop because this is going into another subject. It's kind of hard to know when to stop, but the subject of the flocks and differentiating the flocks is I see it as a separate thing. So
what's with the mandrakes?
The mandrakes actually have a explanation that is not challenged too much. There's some sort of aphrodisiac, and the son is rooting for the mother to produce more sons. So, like, to me, that's a pretty simple one. I don't know that there's a greater complexity I've ever looked for. Makes sense right there.
I always thought it was poisonous, mandrake root. And it was used, in sorcery, and you heard of Mandrake the magician, right? I mean, that comes from that whole, wizardry and sorcery and that whole story, I've never heard it used in a biblical term. I guess I forgot this parasha, what it said,
I think I'm going to look for the Hebrew for it and see if I can come up with anything else.
It depends on how much you take of it.
While you're looking, I'm just going to say, then it hit me that there's a mirroring with a flipping of the genders, because it's when Esau comes back and is hungry and says, let me have some of that stew. I mean, it's the same. It's like, oh, Rachel, maybe, I didn't realize it's supposed to be an aphrodisiac, but have Reuben give me some of those, and then maybe I'll be able to conceive or whatever. And Leah has to bargain that she gets to have Joseph be with Jacob that night, so there's kind of a mirroring there of this bartering that keeps going on.
Yeah, Craig has a good definition. That's kind of what I always heard.
But it's also referred to as an aphrodisiac and an aid in conception for women.
Yeah, but it's a really dangerous plant. I mean, that's crazy that they would even give it to anybody for anything.
Well, they use it also, for painkiller and sleep remedy, and it can cause hallucination, but it's historically been used for painkiller and anesthetic and a sedative over the ages. It's got scopolamine, which is still used in pharmaceuticals.
Why would they have to give that to somebody to get them to have a baby?
Well, it's not, the science of it is one thing, but what it is Reuben is now an adult, and he sees that his mother is hurt, and he thinks her worth will be elevated in her husband's eyes if she bears more children. I mean, that, there's a lot of ways to look at it, but to me, I love this image that the son is looking out for the mother, and he is old enough to understand that this is something that could bring favor in the eyes of Jacob.
So you think they didn't know the dangerous properties of it?
The danger is more and more childbirth.
Well, there's lots of ways to look at it scientifically, but look at some of the things that we know now. I'm just thinking this week on the news, Ozempic is all over the news again for properties that it wasn't developed for. Look at hallucinogenics, that now hallucinogenics are used to actually bring people out of states of mental problems caused even by drug overdose, by drug abuse. So like the science of anything that if we as humans, we continue to learn. So they're continuing to learn the properties of something and how if you tweak it, it can be used for one thing in this amount or for something in a different amount. That speaks to us as humans and our insatiable quest for knowledge. But historically, where this was true, and for the purpose of telling of the story, it is Reuben saying, let me go find some of these dudaim, these mandrakes, bring them to my mother, bring them to his mother Leah, so that Rachel, so that they he creates a situation where Leah would be more favored in his father's eyes. That creates jealousy, and then Rachel tries to, misappropriate the, it's that part of the story. The science of them, I don't think, we put that on because we know more now, but
Right.
at that time it wasn't important.
Oh,
They
goodness
were
gracious.
folk remedies, and I keep thinking about, we heard about laudanum, we hear all these histories. All these things were used because the opiates were used because they were helpful, and they didn't know that they had these addictive properties.
I think
So
we're
there was
assuming a whole lot here.
There was a lot of trial and error. Well, the fact that they were using whatever they had 5,000 years ago is still.
These are men giving it to women.
Yeah, really, that's the big part. Is
I
like,
mean, come on. I think we're assuming a lot when we say, oh, it's good for them and this and that. Mandrake is poison.
Well, okay, I'm gonna listen to you, then I want to come back to this because I think it's really an important, we're circling around something really important. So I want to come back to it, but let's first hear Yehuda and see what Matan put in the chat. Okay.
First of all, I don't think that we actually know that the Hebrew means mandrake, number one. Number two, let's think of the reverse of what actually happened. The trade for the mandrake results in Leah getting pregnant. Doesn't result in Rachel getting pregnant. It doesn't work for Rachel. So maybe this is yet another part of the Torah that says we're not using what the local people use. And this is the example of they don't work.
I want to go back to what Matan said. We're missing the forest for the trees. Thank you very much. That's what I'm circling around trying to say, that the point is that it's all these other things. And Sarah brought up a very important one. We have children being born and their names have significance. And then we have Dina. Okay. Dina, she has a name. No particular importance assigned to it. So missing the forest for the trees is telling us two very important things. First of all, the status of women, and what Sarah brought up, men deciding what women need. Reuven, now that he's an adult, he is going to solve his mother's problems. This is the stuff of the stories. The science, I agree. What we know now, we superimpose it backwards. Sure, it's intriguing, but I don't think that's the point. I think the point is that our ancestors are coming from a place where the clarification of who is important and for what reason, that's the stories that are being told here, and in a very clear way. People are named because of what happened that caused their birth, or what the women who gave birth to them were feeling, or how it changed the relationship in the family. So that's, I think,
it's interesting too, the names of the kids, when you look at them, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Why?
We're going so slow. I was going to ask Aviva why, and so therefore they named it Issachar. I want to know what the literal meanings of these names are, because I don't know.
Okay, so let's hear Marilyn first, and then I'll just give one or two examples. We won't go through all of them.
Like Levi is like joined and harmony, and I'm trying to think of one of the other ones that's got a well-known, it's used all the time. I just jumped out of my head. The names are, some of them have like they're uplifting and they go forward with that legacy, and some of them are very plain and lackluster, and they go forward with those names for the rest of their lives, unless there's some spiritual change in their lives, and then often names get changed.
Do any of the names have to do with the pictograms we have for them, like, Benjamin the Wolf and Ezekiel, all those different pictures of the tribes of Israel?
It may exist, but I haven't seen that.
Well, part of it is because, Reuven references, lirot, to see something.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next Shimon, that's hearing, lishmoa.
Mm-hmm.
And Levi is heart, lev.
Right, join. Yeah.
No. Levi is very different. Levi comes from, it's a different spelling.
Oh,
and
is it?
Comes from
lion, right? Is it lion?
No, that's Lavi, also
Lavi,
different
oh,
spelling.
okay.
Levi spelled that way comes from the same root word as to accompany. It's the same word as a funeral where you accompany the soul to the next.
Well, they
place.
use the,
And
I
just
looked it
one
up, it
second.
said join several times, so.
Yes, right. Join, accompany, same idea. And
Yeah.
she says,
That's what I
line
said.
34, again, she became pregnant, she being Leah, and bore a son and said, now this time my husband will be attached to me, for I have borne him another son. So that's the root word Levi. From there,
Mhm.
and all these, what are all
Right.
right? What are all these names saying? They're saying that Leah, in her desperation, thought that the way to Jacob's heart was bearing him sons. That is very cultural.
Mhm.
That is of the time, and that's how I want to read it. And that's
Mhm.
the significance of the names to me.
Yeah, and Dina's the afterthought.
It's,
She's a girl.
Yeah.
So all you guys are saying is the most important thing over everything is male descendants.
I don't think I'm saying anything like that, but I'm saying in the stories that were written in the time they were written, and how the women always reacted. Because what's the
I don't mean
ultimate-
you personally, Aviva. I mean,
Yeah. No, but what I'm saying is the importance of bearing a son. That's historical in our stories, right? That's like the importance, the
evidently, I
value.
mean, if you have to give the woman, medication and marry the oldest one before I mean, all of these things, it's like a hierarchy.
well,
That
there's no
too.
question that there was a hierarchy of male dominance and male, regard. And it's so interesting because without the females, you can't have any, but not males or females. You need the female role is pretty important in life, but it just has taken a while to catch on as being as important as it is. There's no regard.
Inconceivable.
And it's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious that if you're a female and you aren't bearing children, it's like the worst possible thing that could happen.
Is
Right.
to not to have them, you mean?
If you're a female and you can't bear children or aren't bearing children, it's the worst thing that could happen.
And that shows Leah's the naming of her sons is that my value in my husband's eyes will be
Eyes.
raised if I bear sons.
Mhm.
Okay, Matan, go ahead.
Okay, like you said, the succession is the most important thing. And daughters, not that they don't have any use, but they're useful in forming alliances. And Dina has a very major role later on
Mm.
because of
Yeah.
well, we'll get to that later on. I won't spoil the story, but
Alan shudders.
but women effectively in this time, and even today, there's a big problem I understand in Israel. Women are property, chattel property. They cannot initiate, well, now they can, but until quite recently, under Jewish law, a woman could not initiate a get.
Well, this may surprise you, but in the United States of America, until 1974, we couldn't have our own credit cards.
Or checking account.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of Franco's so-called reforms after the Spanish Civil War was he forbade women to have bank accounts in Spain.
Yeah.
So they were totally dependent on some male.
Yeah.
Yeah, in some ways, the understanding that in societies where women have more independence, the divorce rate goes up. It's true.
Sorry,
I'm
I'm not,
sure it's true.
I'm laughing.
Yeah. And in societies where women really were in the control of the everyday, making sure the species existed, marriage was not an institution in the first place.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Craig?
When you realize it's in the Western world, and then from the heritage of the Old Testament on through the Muslim, even, that was the from the religious foundation in terms of using the rules of the religious texts to control people. That's what's so different than other parts of the world. And again, we're so engrossed in that Western culture. I mean, I was an adult, really. People weren't talking about the matriarchal, the Amazons and all that stuff until much later. There are certain other places in world history where there are plenty of examples of female matriarchal-led societies.
We're one
Greg,
of
I'm
the
sorry.
first generations that allowed women to go to cheder, you know?
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Apparently Craig has had his hand up, but I didn't
Oh, sorry.
notice. So Craig, please go ahead.
Sure. There are so many gender reversals, especially when you play it out against our history, because as illustrated by Fiddler on the Roof and back to our ancestors, they didn't really choose their mate based on love. They were put together sort of like we see in the Torah. But I'm just fascinated by the concept that these women want romantic love. They want romantic connection. And Leah is just longing for it. And wow, to me, we're skipping over the whole concept of this search for love that these women feel. And also with the mandrakes, might be my prosecution criminal defense background, but it almost seems like a rape drug that was, if it was given to the women, but at the same time, as I read the text or have it read to me, it seems like these women were longing to get in bed with Jacob. They wanted to sleep with me tonight. So I don't know.
I love that.
It's all
That's
sort
good.
of confusing with the sexual aggressors, and then the whole concept of Jewish concubines. And you think Jacob would be better than that? He came from a stable, family, but for the problems with Esau, it just confuses a lot of concepts. And how did we get away from romantic love, given the origin story, to what our ancestors experienced with arranged marriages?
Very good.
That's really great, Craig.
Yeah. It is. And I don't know the answer.
I think this whole section also points up the stamina it takes to be a patriarch, because and there's that paragraph in there of he came in from the field. How did he have enough energy to go out to the field when every time he's in a tent they're throwing another woman at
you're
him?
funny. That's hysterical.
Maybe they use the mandrakes for that too.
That could be. Yeah.
It just struck me
Maybe it
too,
was the
again,
mandate.
Old world Viagra.
that this is fate, to progress. How are you going to become this, like the sands on the shore and the stars in the sky? We went from them having 1 or 2 children with all that trouble to having the 12, which was foretold. We had to have this contest and this trying to get into the stable as much as possible kind of thing. It's part of the fulfilling of these promises from Hashem, or what to expect, because of geometric progressions. They didn't call it that then. If it was 2 by 2 children every generation, it would have taken a lot longer. So all of this pushes the story forward as well.
Dinah didn't get a tribe,
That, as Natan was pointing out, that she's going to have very serious problems coming up. And something, Arnie, you mentioned before about the different symbols that go along with the tribes, and that comes up later in when Jacob is on his deathbed, and
Right.
there's a long series of passages where each of the sons is brought in, and he has a blessing for each of them, and talks about basically their spirit animal, or what they represent, and I think that's where those come from.
Yeah.
great.
If
So
we
the
want to
naming-
finish this, I think we need to keep moving.
But I just want to reiterate what Ellen is saying. The naming now are the mothers naming their sons.
Right.
So remember, we all have 3 names. We have the name given to us by our parents. We have the name we are known by, and then we have the name we make for ourselves. So as we round to the end with the blessings, it's the names that the sons have made for themselves in the eyes of their father, how he sees them. So thank you for that. I personally think that this parasha and the next one should have been read at the same time, but boy, that would be very long. So let's keep reading. Whoever, maybe Sarah.
Oh,
Like to
I'm
read?
gonna pass today.
Okay. Somebody, I don't have my screen in front of me anymore.
Vic,
Vic, would you like to read?
I'll be glad to read it. For the little you had before my time has.
Uh-oh, I can't hear Craig.
What? Do you want me to do it?
Yeah, keep reading, but for some reason I
heard Vic.
lost you after you started, so try again.
For the little you had before my time has swollen to a multitude, and the Lord has blessed you on my account. And now when shall I too provide for my household? And he said, what shall I give you? And Jacob said, you need give me nothing if you will do this thing for me. Let me go back and herd your flocks and watch them. I shall pass through all your flocks today to remove from them every spotted and speckled animal and every dark-colored sheep and the speckled and spotted among the goats, and that will be my wages. Oh, am I frozen again? Doggone it. I'm trying. I got frozen. Sorry.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Oh no. Okay. Okay, good. Then my honesty will bear witness for me in the days to come. You go over my wages. Whatever is not spotted and speckled among the goats and dark-colored among the sheep shall be accounted stolen by me. And Laban said, let it be just as you say. And he removed on that day the spotted and speckled he-goats and all the brindled and speckled she-goats, every one that had white on it, and every dark-colored one among the sheep. And he gave them over to his sons.
I can't hear.
I must have a delay.
Okay.
Because the page is not flipping.
Yeah.
So I might be frozen.
No, it's and he put 3 days journey between himself and Jacob is what's on the screen.
Okay, why don't you read for a little bit, Marilyn, and
Can you hear me okay?
yes.
Okay. And he put 3 days journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob herded the remaining flocks of Laban. And Jacob took himself moist rods of poplar and almond and plane tree, and peeled white strips in them, laying bare the white on the rods. And he stood the rods he had peeled in the troughs, in the water channels from which the flock came to drink, opposite the flocks, which went into heat when they came to drink. And the flocks went into heat at the rods, and the flocks bore brindled, spotted, and speckled young. And the sheep Jacob kept apart. He placed them facing the spotted and all the dark-colored in Laban's flocks, and he set himself herds of his own, and he did not set them with Laban's flocks. And so, whenever the vigorous of the flocks went into heat, Jacob put the rods in full sight of the flocks in the troughs for them to go into heat by the rods. And for the weaklings of the flocks, he did not put them. And so the feeble ones went to Laban, and the vigorous ones went to Jacob. And the man swelled up mightily, and he had many flocks, and female and male slaves, and camels and donkeys. And he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken everything of our fathers, and from what belonged to our father, he has made all this wealth. And Jacob saw Laban's face, and look, it was not disposed towards him as in times past. And the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your birthplace, and I will be with you. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah out to the field to his flocks. And he said to them, I see your father's face, that it is not disposed toward me as in times past, but the God of my father has been with me. And you know that with all my strength I have served your father. But your father has tricked me and has switched my wages 10 times over, yet God has not let him do me harm. If thus he said, the spotted ones will be your wages, all the flocks bore spotted ones. And if he said, the brindled ones will be your wages, all the flocks bore brindled ones. And God has reclaimed your father's livestock and given it to me. And so, at the time when the flocks were in heat, I raised my eyes and saw in a dream. And look, the rams mounting the flocks were brindled, spotted, and speckled. And God's messenger said to me in the dream, Jacob. And I said, here I am. Raise your eyes, pray, and see. All the rams mounting the flocks are spotted, brindled, and speckled. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God who appeared to you at Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made me a vow. Now rise, leave this land, and return to the land of your birthplace. And Rachel and Leah answered, and they said to him, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's house? Why we have been counted by him as strangers, for he has sold us, and he has wholly consumed our money. For whatever wealth God has reclaimed from our father is ours and our children's. And so whatever God has said to you, do.
All right,
And
let's take a breather there. Then
Thank
we'll
you.
come back to Craig in a little while. So much is going on here. I'll open.
Mishigas.
Well, there's science.
Mhm.
That thing about the sheep
Yeah.
and right. So that has been, I've read a lot of interesting things about it. There's definitely an explanation that Jacob may have had some understanding from all his years of observation about
Husbandry.
about what?
Husbandry,
Right, animal husbandry and
Well,
recessive genes.
about dominant and recessive genes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yet in line 11, he says, the angel in a dream, the angel said this to me. In other words, he's explaining his knowledge about like the sophistication of choosing what it seems like he's giving his father-in-law the best and keeping the least. And yet he has some ability to know that by doing that, he will end up ahead. So we look at that and we've told these stories and we understand this, but yet in the word, it says, God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. One time when the flocks were in heat, in a dream, I looked up and saw that the male goats mounting the flock were streaked, spotted, and dappled. In that dream, an angel of God said to me, Jacob. And he says, Hineni.
Yeah.
Hineni.
So, the comfort of trying to understand this through the scientific eye only goes so far.
Right.
What we know now of the science may not have been known there, but what we know now about the relationship and the beginnings of faith in our forefathers is what the story, I believe, is conveying.
I think without even knowing modern genetics, people who practiced animal husbandry paid attention to this kind of stuff. They absolutely did.
Yeah,
And
of course,
they were the ones who bred the strongest animals, et cetera, et cetera. They followed it. That was the nature of their success. And the ones who didn't do it didn't actually stay in business.
But, this is a celebration of revenge because he's getting back at Laban for Laban's subterfuge, his substituting one woman for another when they had the agreement, and then demanding another 7 years of work to get the other, and what we look at Laban and say, well, what he did was wrong. does it make it any righter for our hero in this, Jacob, to go and do the same thing to him?
Yeah, like I wonder if Jacob really saw it as revenge, though. Like he could have also, I don't know how he saw it, but he could have also just said, hey, this is fair. I have this talent and I know how to breed them, and I'm not doing anything to him that we didn't have any deal that I would just breed certain ones or something like that. So he just saw it probably as, his right in his position.
And a way to
Not
get
that he
back
was-
at him. And a way to get back at him.
He could have. I mean, like you said, we don't know, but it's
Mhm.
certainly possible.
Maybe not so much a way to get back at him as even out the playing field.
Okay. Okay.
But he has alluded to it because, and then he's starting to have to convince his wife.
How did he allude to it?
He alluded to it because he told Rachel and Leah, you can see that your father has not dealt with me. He's changed my wages. He's done this, he's done that. And part of that now, and then the women are seeing historically in that milieu what they could have expected from their father. Which, by the way, did he have any sons? I don't know. So
I guess what I'm saying is,
I think he's preparing them to have to leave their home, the only home that they ever knew. And
that could be too, but I'm not sure that he meant it as a way to get back at Laban more than just, like I said, evening the playing field.
Well, because it was fairer. Because it was.
Well, we have
It
a
shows
very,
that-
very, oh,
it shows
go
that
ahead, Vic, sorry.
Jacob was he wasn't just total shepherd. He had brains too.
Yeah.
And he
Business
also-
sense, yeah.
But he says plainly in 31 line 3, it says, in line 2, it says, and Jacob saw Laban's countenance plainly, it was no longer favorable to him as before.
Uh-huh.
Okay, he was not disposed toward him as in time past. He saw a change in Laban, and though he was kin, he saw, right? So it took the 7 years of squeezing work out of him, and then the 7 more years of squeezing work out of him. But now Jacob saw,
right?
And when Adonai says to Jacob, return to the land of your ancestors, to your birthplace, and I will be with you. We've heard these lines before.
But how much did he really see? Because look, this is just, a repeat of the story where he fooled his father and his, it's just this, the chickens have come home to roost, and they don't even stop at this stage because, I mean, we haven't quite read it yet, but I know we all know the story that, when Rachel steals the gods and he makes that vow that, if anybody did this in my family, they will die, basically. And guess what? Then Rachel dies because he doesn't even know that she has done it. So he, over and over again, he is a deceived. He's got deception in him. When Joseph vanishes with the caravan, his sons come back and deceive him again. I mean,
Good point. Good point.
Which winds up also saving them in the end, which is kind of a weird turnaround.
I think the story of Jacob always makes you come back to the notion of karma. If there's an equivalent notion of karma, it shows up in this story. However, here we go again with the way we're reading this, and now what Jacob just said again. We read this section, how it was put together about the rods and all that, and I guess that's to know how Jacob was wise enough, or in animal husbandry or whatever, to know maybe some chemical reaction when they gave him the water would lead to the speckled. But then after the fact, when Laban realizes that it wasn't like, a random 50-50 thing that seemed fair, Jacob was getting all the good sheep, then he gives the whole story that this all came to him in a dream, that this is when he found out that Hashem said, I will be with you. I'm answering your call. So there again, is it the divine intervention of pushing the story in the direction that it's meant to go? And how much of it was Jacob's own personality or own proclivity to be a deceiver? I don't think he started out wanting to be a deceiver. There is still part of that Jacob from when he was young, studying and being on his mother's side, So,
do we
but
even
yeah.
know that Jacob has this dream, or is it a story he's telling? Because at that time and place, dreams were considered to, be portents of
Right.
things.
So, but that's the whole point. How you see it depends on whether you
Right.
think
Is
this
he
is
deceiving Lavan?
whether it's his free
bringing up
will,
the dreams?
whether it's his conniving, or whether, because the story the fulfillment of the covenants to Abraham can't happen unless, there's a perpetuation of and so then you can start looking at this as some kind of allegory for the survival of the fittest and all of that, if you want to look at it that way. Because in order for the blessings that Hashem promised Abraham, he'd have to have the wealth. He'd have to have the ability to feed this huge family that's being created, and that's going to multiply by leaps and bounds in the next couple generations, because he had so many sons, and that in a realistic way, that can't happen unless it's set up to happen. So it's all very clever in some ways, the way that this is put together, to the degree that human beings had to analyze over the years how to write down what was observed for so many years, and on and on, So,
I like
Right.
what Yehuda said about the dream and the conniving part. It reminded me of Fiddler on the Roof, the whole dream sequence there to make it an emes, you say, oh, I saw this in a dream,
Craig?
No, I love that song and that imagery, Arnie.
Yeah.
I was thinking about something that is familiar to all of us because we are of a certain age, and that is television. And when television first was introduced to me, I'm that old, it was black and white.
Me
And
too.
then color TV came in. And unless I'm missing it here, with the story about the different colored sheep, we start to hear about multicolored this and that, and we know soon we're going to hear about Joseph's multicolored coat. So I think this is kind of like the exciting moment when we go from black and white to color TV.
Do you remember the first
And
color TV?
isn't it strange that humankind, yeah, Bonanza, wasn't it, on color TV? Yeah, I remember the first color TV.
But they weren't truly color like
I
we
hope
see
you
them
can-
today. They were just like bands of color,
Yeah.
Sometimes you'd see a green face or a purple one, they were just, it wasn't.
That's where the
they never
NBC
worked to
Peacock came
separate
from, because we had
everything.
color.
But the use of it too. Do you remember? I think it was Schindler's List, where the movie was not in color. It was in like sepia tone, and then all of a
That
sudden,
was the Wizard of Oz.
no,
that
no,
just
it
came up
wasn't
because
the Wizard of Oz. It was Schindler's List. where
The little girl with the red
Schindler's-
coat.
oh,
yes.
yeah. The
Yeah.
first
all
one
of a
that did it was
sudden it
Wizard
goes
of
to
Oz.
color, and it changes, like it's a spiritual change that's happening, like to the the protection and God being with them, and it was quite well used, and it wasn't all, it was sepia, it wasn't black and white, but then it turned to color. It was kind of cool the way they did that.
I just want to give Arnie disappeared off the screen, but Arnie, I wanted to tell you that your references back to Fiddler on the Roof are very apt, because that the classicness of those stories come from the classicness of the Torah stories.
Yeah.
That's why they ring true to us, and that's why we understand them. So if our first introduction to Jewish culture and the culture of anti-Semitism, whatever, is from there, and only then do we read the original stories that were first committed to paper, then they do make sense. Either way, either direction they flow and make sense. And, the world of art and literature does prove that out. These concepts of what our stories are telling us, and the part of the story we're at here is part of this arc. If you want to, this is the lens I'm going to put on it today. It's God in search of understanding how humanity moves forward. When we get to Moses, we understand that God says, it's leadership I'm looking for. I get it now. It's leadership, right? So all these stories, they're not lost once we get to the idea of a real leader. They build, and they constantly build. But the concept of leadership, and what does the leadership have to understand also? That the covenant has to be accepted by all the people. All the people. So now we have, Abraham, covenant, sure. And then, we have our individual people saying, sure. But it's not until the understanding and the whole road that leads to everyone being present to accept the covenant that it becomes rooted.
So do you think the Torah gave us the example of telling a good story? I mean, seriously. I mean, it's really a cultural thing with us. I brought this up before in this discussion.
I think so.
In my family, why tell a truth when the Bubba Mice is so much more entertaining and you're going to remember, seriously, I mean, that's my whole family is like that.
No, I think you have a good point. I think that
Every
storytelling
culture,
among
you have
Jews
Aesop's
is
fables, you have the parables. I mean, I think that's part of human nature too.
I think it's especially among Jews. I mean, the Hawaiians have their oral tradition that they hand down, but
And the
I don't-
Irish and the
yeah,
Italians.
but
Can I have to share something with you guys? The author, Sholem Aleichem, who, you brought up Fiddler on the Roof, so this came to mind. He had the most massive funeral that New York City has ever seen. And the streets of Manhattan were full. They went across the Williamsburg Bridge and then down Fifth Avenue to the Lower East Side to Mount Nebo
Wow.
Cemetery in Cypress Hills, Queens. And the reading of his will and epitaph was done on the day, and his burial was in accordance with his request to be buried among the people, not with the wealthy. He didn't want to have because he was famous, he didn't want that kind of a funeral. He wanted to be with the people. And he wrote out the whole plot line of his last day on earth before being buried. And it was, like I said, the most extreme procession and to date. I don't know whether it's been beat since then, but up when it happened, which was, let's see the date here.
who was this, Marilyn?
Sholem Aleichem, the author, the person who wrote Fiddler.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And I just got to say, of course, because he was a Rabinowitz.
That's it. Exactly.
Right.
Shalom Rabinowitz. Exactly. Well, I want to come back to something that's in the Torah here, and that is the moving the story forward meant that God stepped in. God told Jacob, "It's time to get out of town. It's time to go back home, or back to your family," and the 14 years, we don't really get much reference at all to there being any communication between Jacob and God. And they don't say, "Oh, God came to him in a dream." It's just God said to him, "Get out. Time to go."
Yeah.
And I think that from a storytelling standpoint, we needed to move on. We needed to get him out of there and get him going back to the rest of the family and where they're going to be, so that they can be in place when the famine comes and they have to go to Egypt, and all of those things are going to happen in the future. But I thought it's almost literally a Deus ex machina that just dropped in there.
Actually, Alan, almost every time somebody has to make a big move, God's in there.
Yeah. In the movie version of Les Miserables, there's a certain music that comes on when the people have to do some big change. Da, 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 da. I mean, I can't sing, but if you listen to the score, you'll know what I'm talking about. And it's like, it's God's communication to the people, I think, to have them be able to respond and to move en masse, or, you know, to hear the change between the mundane and the profound. There's something that happens in the form of the communication, so that more than one person recognizes it, and they recognize it in, you know, together as a corporal body. They can move together. And I feel like, you know, there's a soundtrack to this on a spiritual level. And what can I say? I'm theatrical, but I think that's how God moves people. He does speak, if you will, in a way that is able to get people to move.
Greg, go ahead. You're trying to drowning you out.
You don't like that, huh?
No. I just, Craig has been trying to say something for a while.
I just am intrigued by Shalom Aleichem and Fiddler on the Roof, and the fact that the author made the conscious choice to make his protagonist Tevye not the father of a bunch of boys like patriarchs, but more like Juan, and have the daughters who need to get married. Now, the guy we're reading about today was kind of a mean guy, not as lovable as Tevye, but it seems to me it was the author's desire to move Judaism and our people forward to the concept of love again, where Tevye recognized that there's a new daughters have rights and the right to fall in love, and we're going to get rid of the old ways, kind of pursuant to the dream that Arnie referenced. So yeah, Shalom Aleichem, created by God, might have been furthering the story with Fiddler, which we talk about so much, almost as a holy book.
That's a very good observation. I like that. The counter to all these male-centered stories is that the stuff of life is not unique. You know, that's one way of storytelling. Very interesting. I like that. I'm going to be thinking about that.
But Tevye is portrayed as the poor man, so having no sons would you know, feed right into that.
Not accidental.
No sons to help him. And you have to marry off the daughters, which costs money too. So I think it fits into Tevye's character not to have sons.
I think Yuda's trying to speak, but he can't unmute. I don't know.
Hit it on the side. Bang the side of it. No.
Yuda, wipe your finger off on your jeans and then try again.
Scientifically.
There we go.
I'd say that, you know, Tevye's wealth was measured in his women. There's no question about it. He had amazing daughters, and his wife was amazing too.
Yeah, but they couldn't. That's not a financial. I'm talking financially.
Yeah, but what he's saying is true, and you can't.
No, I understand. I know,
but
I agree.
Sarah, you can't divide it, because the reality is that what he's talking about leads to their resources, which is, you know, identical to money in a way. You know, like those women made it possible.
For what?
Them to progress and thrive.
Well, I mean, we don't know what happens because, you know, they leave and they go to America, so we assume that. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about he had no sons to help him while he was a family. Like he had to provide for all these girls. He didn't have any sons to help him with the cow or the field or anything like that. He was a poor man.
The women did it.
Okay, I disagree. I have a right to disagree. And I think that was part of him being portrayed as a poor man, that he had no sons. Well, even though his daughters may have been an asset somewhere down the line in the future in New York somewhere.
I think if we're going to finish this portion, we've got like a half an hour to go, and there's a lot to read still.
Oh my goodness gracious. All right, I'll try to read a little. I'm kind of out of breath, but I'll try.
Okay.
And Jacob rose and bore off his children and his wives on the camels. And he drove all his livestock and all his substance that he had acquired his property and livestock that he had acquired in Padan Aram, and to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. And Laban had gone to shear his flocks, and Rachel stole the household gods that were her father's, plural gods. And Jacob delivered Laban the Aramean in not telling him he was fleeing. He deceived him, and he fled, he and all that was his. And he rose and he crossed the Euphrates and set his face toward the high country of Gilead. And it was told to Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled. And he took his kinsmen with him and pursued him a 7 days' journey and overtook him in the high country of Gilead. And God came to Laban the Aramean in a night dream and said to him, "Watch yourself, lest you speak to Jacob either good or evil." And Laban caught up with Jacob, and Jacob had pitched his tent on the height, and Laban had pitched his with his kinsmen in the high country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done, deceiving me and driving my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee in stealth and deceive me and not tell me? I would have sent you off with festive songs, with timbrel and lyre. And you did not let me kiss my sons and my daughters. Oh, you have played the fool. My hand has the might to do you harm. But the God of your father said to me last night, watch yourself, lest you speak to Jacob either good or evil. And so you had to go because you longed so much for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods?" And Jacob answered and said to Laban, "For I was afraid, for I thought you would rob me of your daughters. With whomever you find your gods, that person shall not live." Geez, so now it becomes about the little gods. "Before our kinsmen make recognition of what is yours with me and take it." But Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban came to Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the two slave girls, and he found nothing. And he came out of Leah's tent and went into Rachel's tent. And Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel cushion and sat on them. And Laban rummaged through the whole tent and found nothing. And she said to her father, let not my lord be incensed that I am unable to rise before you, for the way of the woman is upon me." And he searched and did not find the household gods. And Jacob was incensed and voiced his grievance to Laban. And Jacob spoke out and said to Laban, "What is my crime? What is my guilt that you should race after me? Though you rummage through all my things, what have you found of all your household things? Set it here before my kin and yours, and they shall determine between us two. These 20 years I have been with you, your ewes, and she-goats did not lose their young. The rams of your flock I have not eaten. What was torn up by beasts I brought not to you, I bore the loss. From my hand you could seek it. What was stolen by day and stolen by night. Often by day the parching heat ate me up, and frost in the night, and sleep was a stranger to my eyes. These 20 years in your household I served you, 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flocks, and you switched my wages 10 times over. Were it not that the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the terror of Isaac was with me, you would have sent me off empty-handed. My suffering and the toil of my hands God has seen, and last night he determined in my favor." And Laban answered and said to Jacob, "The daughters are my daughters, and the sons are my sons, and the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. Yet for my daughters, what can I do now, or for their sons whom they bore? And so come, let us make a pact, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me." And Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsmen, "Gather stones." And they fetched stones and made a mound, and they ate there on the mound. And Laban called it Yegar Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Galed. And Laban said, "This mound is witness between you and me this day." Therefore its name is called Galed. And Mitzpah, For he said, may the Lord look out between you and me when we are out of each other's sight. So there's a lot of names there. I don't know what the difference is between all those last names that they mentioned right there. I'm sure that they all have meanings that I've never looked into in this part of the conversation. Like
Yeah,
That
one calls it,
mitzvah thing
yeah.
has gone,
Well,
that's-
and then they call the other, they each call the place two different, where they set up the stones, they each called it two different names as well as the mitzvah thing. There's like three different names there, Aviva. Maybe you
Yeah.
can shed some light on that.
I will. For that, I always go back to I'll hear Arnie while I look it up, but for that, I always get back to the Hertz because they give a lot more of the history.
But
of
I
the
really
names.
like Rachel. Like she uses her period for something at least. She's like, I can't get off of this horse, this camel, because I have my period, so you can't look in there.
I was just going to say that that's used in so many plots these days. I just saw a movie where the spy hid the microfilm in her Kotex box. So
I think it's wonderful. We have to have something going down for us.
it's such a common thing I've seen in plots, that women use that device. But what I was going to ask, he's called an Aramean, but I thought that they were all supposed to only hang out with Canaanites. Is there a difference between an Aramean and a Canaanite?
They're not supposed to hang out with Canaanites, are
Right.
they? No.
no, Arameans are, that's what everybody spoke to, Aramaic.
No,
I think that's
Aramaic.
different. I think that's different, isn't it?
No,
Aramaic,
I maybe,
Arameans.
I thought it was of my people were the people of Canaan that, Abraham
No,
wanted
No.
everyone to hang
no,
out with.
no.
think
His
so.
people were back in Ur, where he came from, which is not supposed to be current day Syria
Oh,
somewhere.
yeah, I had it backwards.
The whole
Okay.
point,
Ur
you
of the
remember
Chaldeans.
the Canaanites were an abomination to God. That's why he said he was going to give that land to.
Gotcha.
That's why we
I
worried
had it
about
backwards.
intermarriage from the very beginning, because Abraham goes in there as a stranger, but every time he has to marry anybody off, he goes back to his homeland.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah, he's got it now.
And we can all remember our parents having a heart attack at the idea of any of us dating somebody who wasn't Jewish.
Is this the first time in the Torah where we have hyperbolic exaggeration during a negotiation?
No, it happens a lot.
I didn't say, is this the only time? I said, is it the first time?
Be more specific, Yehuda.
Well, he says, well, 10 times, oh, blah, blah. Who's counting?
Okay.
Yeah, I guess, I mean,
was.
it's out there, but I mean, Abraham's dealings with Sarah being his sister, while it wasn't protracted outside, a long verbal thing, that's pretty profound.
I'm not saying deception either. I'm saying using 10 times is just as an
Yeah.
arbitrary number to argue your point. Is that the first time this has ever happened? I'm not sure.
I don't know I don't know that you can assume it's hyperbole. I mean, except for us, exaggeration to show that Laban was not a square dealer. He did, he was not. And even though Jacob had it in his background, I mean, he went into the contract with Laban for Rachel in the first place and did the 7 years.
Twice.
Well, then he had to do it twice. There's my point being there's no sense that Jacob started out trying to pull anything over on Laban. It was the other way around.
Maybe he was counting.
True also, and the 7 years itself was a huge extraction of time. I think that was over the top, and I don't even think he knew what he was doing when he was offered that length of time of servitude.
How we measure years, and none of these people had their first child till they were 40 years old, so we don't even know exactly what a year was.
Jacob was smitten with Rachel, and he made this deal for Rachel and I don't mean to be mean, but he got stuck with Leah. So when it cost him another 7 years, at this point in his youth and his, you know, overwhelming love for Rachel, he was just going to do it. He said, okay. And then he had to.
We can't
Right,
really
it-
think that he got stuck because she gave him all these sons.
Right.
And
I
that
know that, but what I'm
ultimately
saying is
the
it was up
goal.
front. The deal
Yeah,
was
but he didn't get stuck because Hashem was with him,
right.
and Hashem
Absolutely.
filled the plate.
Yes. Okay.
But-
I
but-
agree
But
with
you know
that.
what?
but-
Talk about poetic. What always struck me, and I have to thank Craig in a way because first I thought it was exaggerated, but the idea that is the first notion of idea of romantic love or maybe even lust to some degree. But the poetry of Jacob saying the 7 years went by like a flash, you know, that's something out of like a 16th century sonnet or something, you know, because he was just he was just so anxious to, you know, it was so important for him to wed you know, Rachel, that it wasn't work for him, you know. It just flew by fast.
But to Yehuda's point about the hyperbole, I think some of this is setting the stage for the rules that are going to be laid down much later on, in when we're in the desert and being told this is how to be a community, and there are very specific rules about a fair weight, a fair measure, dealing fairly with people, not withholding wages. All the things that Laban did we're being told those are wrong. We will eventually be told those are wrong, and this is how you're supposed to deal with people in business and family, and all of that's going to be
exactly.
all that's going to be established. But we don't have the community yet to have that built in.
So Yehuda's point about whether something happened for the first time. This is half joking, but I was thinking about Craig here. I said, I feel like, is this the first time that we had a defendant in a civil case defending himself? Because, you know, Jacob is there. Let us all go to the center and let everybody hear what you did and decide who gets what,
Right.
you know. And then he lays his whole case, which is where Yehuda's saying there's a lot of hyperbole, you know. But he was trying to make his case for who gets what. And even to the end, though, Laban didn't want to agree. He said, no, they're my daughters, they're this and that. And again, only because of Hashem's intervention with coming to Laban somehow did he let him go, let my people go, you know, and then he didn't resort to violence to keep him.
You know, we hear later how large a contingent that Jacob led out of the camp.
Mm-hmm.
And to suggest for a second that Laban can even take that on, you know, basically Jacob left with a small army of people, you know, and wealth and younger people. You know, they were, you know, they were his earned lot. And, you know, to suggest for a second, Laban was just faking it. He was faking every bit of this thing, you know, and he knew that the respect that Jacob had for family per se kept Jacob from smacking him across the face.
Yeah.
Arnie?
Yeah, for as much as we vilify Laban, let's remember that he did save his second daughter and didn't give her away to someone else. You know, so that was
True.
kind of honest, you know?
True.
He saved a
Well-
lot of free labor.
Yeah.
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 Craig?
Was Laban a Jew? I know he was related, but was he considered
No.
because he had these other gods?
Who? I didn't
And
hear
then-
what you said,
Yeah,
Craig.
Laban. He had,
Who?
you know, yeah,
God.
he had idols.
So his daughters weren't Jewish either?
Well, but God is talking directly, which is interesting.
We
So
don't have this concept yet.
And
Historic-
also,
I'm asking if Rachel and Leah were Jewish.
We don't
No.
have this concept yet in existence because the concept of a covenant has not been offered up yet. We're still in the God searching stage. So those designations don't mean anything. What we're starting to see is a differentiation between the
So is
people.
it the same as when Eliezer went to, you know, when Isaac said to Eliezer, go and get a
a
wife.
wife
I mean, go and get a wife from my people, right? Basically,
for my
isn't that what
son.
it-
Right.
for my
Yeah.
son. So is this the same as that? Was Laban from his people?
No, because it's what Abiva says. You know, the Brit Milah was a male thing initially, with Abraham, and you know, it never even referenced.
Right.
You know, and the eventual covenant that takes place as history rolls on gets exposed. I think God's trying to figure out what's the nature of this covenant anyway.
But there was some realization of that because
The,
Isaac, wait,
the conversation was still going.
the conversation
Well,
was
I
go and
just
get my
want-
son a daughter from my people. Don't go to the Canaanites. Don't go and get her from the Canaanites. Go and get her from
Uh-huh.
my people. So that's what I'm saying. Asking is, it doesn't really say in there that kind of thing as far as Jacob going to
You know, what I'm
Rachel.
throwing out of you is what is the
Jacob-
nature of us requiring that the line go through this deceptive cheat? Because it happens twice.
Didn't help our reputation.
Well, it's a great conversation of projection of why is this where the line had to go. That, I mean, it's not, and it's not even an easy conversation, of course.
Because they were Aramean, right? So
But isn't he?
Well, Abraham was Aramean.
What is
It-
God doing? What is
yeah,
God
but
doing?
I think-
isn't Laban Aramean?
Laban's Aramean.
Yeah.
They're all
So he is from Abraham's group.
yeah,
So the daughters are from Abraham's group.
right.
Yes.
They are.
Okay, that's all right. That answers my
And
question.
I would say you're getting, you're talking about who's Jewish and not. Abraham.
Well, I mean,
leaves his home- they're genetically related. They're from the same.
I guess
genetic
I'm not
stock,
saying
but-
Jewish. Jewish was the wrong word to use, I think. But
But
just that they were
he's not he's related to Abraham, but no, he's not his group really. He's not going to be his tribe. He was just the source, you know. I mean, try to think back then. Who were they going to marry with? You know, I mean, it was, so
I want to hear Craig and then actually Vic, then Craig,
Right.
then I want to add something. Vic, go ahead.
All this goes on between Arameans, and there would be separate groups of them, and but they're all the same source.
yeah.
Chosen.
That's answers my question. Basically, they weren't like
Good.
from Canaanites or some outside group. They were basically from Abraham's group, even though they're separate Aramean groups around.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Abraham grew up in that group.
yeah. I see.
Craig, I want to hear Craig.
I think we're experiencing it. And I blame that on Alan. It's your fault, Alan, the Zoom
Well-
connection this week. I'm
What?
on as Silverman, but can you guys hear me okay? No, I'm just saying that there's a delay. And all I wanted to communicate, is that isn't it sort of our conceit that God speaks to us, spoke to Abraham, spoke to Moses. So that's why it's a little startling that he's speaking directly to this guy who's got false gods in his closet or whatever. And then the one thing I know about and maybe can educate you guys is about my native city of Denver and how the Old Testament can pop up in the strangest places, which was Denver's old Union Station. Our train station had a big arch which said on one side when you came in, welcome, and as you left, Mizpah, Mizpah. And while some argued it was a Native American thing, everybody more or less realized it came from Genesis and the Old Testament than the Torah.
Yeah,
So
may the Lord
Really?
be with
there
you.
was in our
Yeah, may
I
the
wonder
Lord
how
be
it got
with you.
there.
I sort of like Moses got in the Supreme Court. I think they liked some of our stuff back in the day,
Yeah.
when they were trying to use some of our stuff.
Well, they just added to it. They didn't ever take it away. I mean, the Old Testament has always been part and parcel, part of what they consider scripture.
Arnie?
That's true.
I just think that Jews should make a greater effort to get along with Iran. Reason being, that's probably where the Arameans were, in that general area. And also, the only person in the whole Torah that's mentioned as a Mashiach was Cyrus the Great, and I don't know, I just feel like this whole enmity between us has been created by outside forces. And the smart thing to do is to have more cooperation. And there's a long history of how Jews flourished in Iran through the
That's true.
centuries. It's just a shanda, okay?
Um,
Our languages are similar too.
Yeah, everything, really.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Arnie, a few years ago, you and I were in Prague, and in one of the historic synagogues, there was actually an exhibit, a photo exhibit, about Persian Jews, kind of around the world. And there was one really interesting theme, is that the Persian Jews did not yearn to go to the land of Israel. They yearned to go back to Persia, not to Iran, to Persia. So as religious or observant as they might have been, they felt like Persia was their historic place that they wanted to go to. So it's very interesting what you're saying. And I agree, it's the other conquests that have led to the enmity. Because if you really look at the map and all these places that are mentioned, and I started looking this up, but I got lost when we were talking about the names of the places. But if you look at them, they are not unique to just the one little space between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. Our history, our stories take place in that whole greater area. But the one other thing I wanted to say, and that's all I'm going to say, is to that question of were they Jews? So if you look at the very nuanced threads of the people who continue our story, in other words, the naming of the generations, the thread that moves through is pretty clear. And in this part of the story, Sarah, what we read is when the women gave birth, their names reflected their understanding of a God, right? So that, and that continues. The naming of the people who become the tribes and their ancestors have to do with the relationship to God, seeing that God gave me this child, so I will name him so and so. So that's the third. Was there a concept yet? No, but the ones who will perpetuate who we became in the stories had that one essence, that one element of seeing the one God, not the gods. So
Yeah,
anyway, just
yeah.
wanted to add that.
Mhm.
We do have like 6 more lines.
You should add that the women are the ones who are naming the children.
Yes, exactly. Women
Yeah.
always had a little bit more clarity, and but they had a lot of work to do. They didn't have an open forum to share their insights.
Hey. So now
Okay,
that's
we have
just
like-
another reason why God had to change Abraham's name, because he's the only one who didn't. And then you wonder why then Yaakov got his from the heel from Rebecca, but he still got changed for a different reason. So that's interesting. With
Yeah.
Viva, as a matter of fact, what you said, we have a neighbor, Frank, who is Persian. He's not Iranian, he's Persian. And I have asked him before if there was a switch in leadership. He said he would go back in a heartbeat. He would absolutely, he's lived most of his life just here. And yet he would go back to Persia in a heartbeat if it was a different government there.
Yeah. I don't know what line we left up, but Craig, now that we can hear you again, would you like to carry us out with the last few lines?
Oh,
I think there
Okay.
were, I keep trying to keep notes, but I can't do it. There we go.
should you abuse my daughters, and should you take wives besides my daughters, though no one else is present? See, God is witness between you and me. And Laban said to Jacob, look, this mount, and look, the pillar that I cast up between you and me. Witness be the mound, and witness the pillar, that I will not cross over to you past this mound, and you will not cross over to me past this mound, and past this pillar for harm. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the gods of their fathers, judge between us. And Jacob swore by the terror of his father Isaac. And Jacob offered sacrifice on the height and called to his kinsmen to eat bread. And they ate bread and passed the night on the height. And Laban rose early in the morning and kissed his sons and his daughters and blessed them. And Laban went off and returned to his place. And Jacob had gone on his way, and messengers of God accosted him. And Jacob said when he saw them, this is God's camp. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim.
Okay, so in that
We did.
reference to the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, though Abraham was chosen to get up and leave, Nahor was his brother. They came from the same stock. And so what Lavan is saying is the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor will be the judge between us, right? So there's the family connection never goes away, but the thread that we're picking up throughout the story is how God figures out eventually how to have a covenant with people, not a person.
But it's a
There's an expression.
different part of the family.
Say it again, Craig. We didn't hear you.
I'm trying to say it's a definite different side of the family, because to me it's like picking an arbitration. I'm going to pick my side and you get to pick your side, and they're going to be the judge in the middle, because we know these guys favor me and these guys favor you. I was just wondering, when Laban kisses his sons, are those the grandsons
Yeah,
that are being
that's
referred to?
it's generally acknowledged that the terms for family can brother and son can mean son and grandson. It's the terminology does not specifically mean that generation. That's in translation seems like it means.
Isn't there some significance in that, basically Laban is in the middle, and he's not referenced here. It's Nahor, his father, is referenced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's an expression that was slipped in here twice in this last part of the parsha, describing God as the terror of Isaac. Now, I have in my mind why that would be appropriate, but it's just it's I think an interesting turn of phrase that is loaded.
I never heard it before either.
Can you tell us which line you're talking about?
Sure. It's in line 54, and then before that it was line 54, and it came up again in line 42. Let me bring that up.
Line 42, the God of Abraham, the fear of Isaac. And, it's sort of weird. Earlier also it mentions, that Abraham, your father, never refers to Isaac as your father.
Right.
That was a little weird. We didn't talk about that.
The God of, but it's translated here, the God of Abraham and the terror of Isaac. So would that be Ufachad?
Yeah.
Yitzchak?
God.
Yeah.
Right.
But this could also be as simple as a reference to Isaac almost having his life taken away.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. That's what I got. And then it comes up again in that one in 54. Yeah. Jacob swore by the terror of his father Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
Capital T.
I don't see it in the Hebrew, but the term that Jacob, Vayizbach Yaakov, right? We're talking about the binding,
Mhm.
right? The binding is bezevach. So I think that's where the translation comes from, because I don't see any other way. Vayizbach Yaakov, yeah, swore by the terror. In other words, there's a reference to the Akedah right
Mhm.
there.
Yeah.
I don't
Isn't
understand
it
that.
disturbing?
Why, what do you mean there's a reference to the Akida, the
In
terror?
line 54, the first word Vayizbach and
Yeah,
the third word Zevach are from the
Yeah.
root word of sacrifice.
oh,
Sacrifice
why
in
does he
the
call it,
mountain.
why does he call it terror? Oh,
Like
Why
I said, I
terror?
didn't know either, but now when I look at it,
that's why I didn't make
Yeah.
I didn't make that connection.
right, that's the only
It was
connection I'm making,
certainly
because it's,
it was a frightening event. What's post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma.
Yeah.
You know,
More like
Aviva's
trauma.
referencing the Hebrew of line 53 and line 54 together, that the Hebrew leads one to the other.
right.
That I understand, but I didn't understand the terror part.
Yeah, I didn't actually understand it either. I had to really search for it. Craig.
Well, this is disturbing, and Alan pointed it out. Isn't this the headline? Torah calls Hashem a terrorist. Is that the same word that's used in Israeli papers today for terror that's being used here in the Old Testament? And what is terrorism? It's using violence to try to get your way in one form or another. And we've talked about Isaac, but here God himself is calling it terrorism and saying, yeah, I use terrorism.
So terrorism, by definition, does not have to include physical violence. It is something that one entity does to another to cause them to change their behavior due to fear. Now, often it's the fear of violence, and that's what we use it as nowadays, but there doesn't actually have to be physical violence involved in it. So terror is causing people to change their
Right, but
behavior
there was
because of fear.
That's just one connotation. Think of the word terrified. I mean, it's got in English, it's
Yeah.
to be made fearful by something.
Yeah.
So terrorist is someone who elicits fear in order to get their own way, but it's
Right.
not the only definition.
And we have an interesting crime description that we very often hear, or in the police reports here, of terroristic threatening, where when somebody is threatening violence but not necessarily committing it, they can be brought up on charges.
Well, that is the charge. That's the violation.
Marilyn?
Yeah, just that is itself the abuse, that the fact that you are feeling that you're in peril, you're intimidated by the communication, that in itself is the terror.
And many times you bring it to court and they'll put a restraining order on someone.
Craig?
Well, a guy just got 15 years in Colorado for threatening a Denver district court judge. And we don't have to go to the terror inflicted on Isaac. Didn't God, by speaking directly to Laban, terrorize him to an extent? You do this or
yeah. Did Laban ever had God talk to him before?
Yeah.
Who is this big, deep voice? Who actually
Maybe the
looks
music
like a
comes
woman
first.
with a beard on him?
God, did it say that it came to that Laban had a dream? Did it say it was from a
Yes,
dream?
yeah,
Yes,
in a
so
night
then it's
in a
dream.
night dream.
So
Yes. And again, we got the fiddler view, only don't be frightened.
I played Graham at Seidel once, so 40 years ago. So that was
I often wonder if God speaks to us in actual voice, because, when he speaks to us in dreams or speaks to us through our heart or thoughts or something, it's just as present to us, when we feel we're getting a message somehow from a higher source. And, I don't think we need to differentiate them, but you know, they're definitely there. There's these different voices we hear.
Sometimes dreams can be like just real. I mean, like you're in a
Yeah.
dream. It's like it's really real. The dream itself.
And
I
you
had a weird
wonder
one
how
like
much
that this morning.
schizophrenia was present with these elders, you know?
But you know, in a weird way, that brings us back to the very beginning. God is in this place, in your mind, in your dreams, in your. It's when the bridge, almost like Jacob said, the bridge between your conscious and your unconscious mind, the bridge between these intuitions and these feelings that you have, to bring it into your conscious mind to make decisions based on that. You know,
Thank you.
because
That's what I was trying to say. Thank you. You said it better.
roll today.
But there's also the physical location that God is in this place, and I did not know. And as Yehuda pointed out, we don't really know whether that should be translated I did not know God or I did not know that God was in this place. But later we're going to have a mountain that's being called the home of God, or God's mountain, and we're going to have, in fact, a lot of things that are going to go on during the wanderings in the desert have certain places that are considered the residence of God, and yet in the image of the heavenly escalator, there's God at the top, looking down as the messengers are going back and forth, and so there we get that image of a heavenly abode, and so I don't think we've made up our minds at this point yet of whether God is everywhere or whether there are certain places where you go and God's presence is going to be very well established or very palpable.
Well, that's a very important delineation between some of the sects in Judaism and Hasidism, which says that God is everywhere
Right.
and is everything.
I would like to propose again that it's not literal. This has to do with the limitations of human beings in this form. For Jacob to say that is more for he can set a reminder to himself where he had this revelation, you know? So it's more like a memorial marker, like on Route 66, you know? This is where I had this. He's got to know, or he's going to know that Hashem is going to be with him everywhere. But it's I think it's more to remind the humans where versus literally to say, oh, if you want to find God, come here, you know.
Well, I mean, I think that's exactly correct, because God is not limited the way we are. God can, without any problem, be everywhere. You know, that's not an issue for God. It's an issue for us. But if you're omnipotent and omniscient and omnipresent, there's no conflict.
Well, yet here is Jacob having a realization that God was there, but he didn't realize it. Stay tuned for next week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That
And-
even the understanding of the presence does not shield you from struggling.
And maybe a little mandrake root helped him.
Or smoking something.
Yeah.
But speaking of next week, a reminder that we have a Shabbat service next week. It's normally at the end of the month, normally in the fourth Saturday of the month. But Sherry specifically requested this because it's the 24th anniversary of her adult bat mitzvah, and she is going to be reading from Vayishlach, right?
And
it's 21st because we were
21st.
already here.
21st.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, 21st.
We
now,
weren't
I'm
here
sorry.
24 years ago.
21st anniversary. Okay.
And Hanukkah is, refresh my memory here. When?
Oh, Hanukkah is the week after, I guess.
Okay.
I think it started. Let's see. When does it start?
It starts
That's like
legitimately on the 14th.
But-
The 14th to the 22nd.
Monday is our second session of Judaism 101.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Everybody is welcome to join. Most of you, I think, have been at the first one.
I have to, but what do I have to do something special, like electronically, to join?
Do I need a code or something that I don't
There's a
have?
link, just like all the other links
Yeah,
that
I
you
know,
click
but you
on.
know, I
And you should have gotten an email, if it hasn't, I thought it already had
went
gone
out.
out once.
I got
Yes, yes.
yeah, I'm not saying it didn't, but we know that we
Okay.
have a problem. Yeah,
I don't know how you
okay.
captured
call
my
you.
picture off of the screen. I was shocked to see my.
Can you send it to me again? Can you send it to me too, please?
Sure. I'll resend it. I'll resend it today or tomorrow. So
And I can, is
I'll
it a
send it to
problem
you,
to send-
Marilyn.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
you noticed that, Ruth Ellen. I took that off one of
Yes.
these. I took that off one of these Zoom
I
sessions.
thought, here I am again. I go.
And how timely, because I wasn't even thinking ahead for how relevant it is to being in between these two
We're at
parshot
the
that we're reading.
parasha of God
I
struggling.
know, and I've already done a little bit of what you asked of me because I'm glad I did. I mean, I pulled out some old texts from
Yeah.
things, and I already, there were so many times I kind of wanted to bring it up in the discussion today because there's overlapping with the God struggling and the God